And then we're opening phone and text lines 2 days out from Trump's so-called Liberation Day, when he's promised massive overhaul of tariffs, raising major questions about where our economy is heading. New polling shows Americans are cutting.
Information is scarce. The quake's epicenter was near the huge city of Mandalay, Myanmar's second largest city. Michael Sullivan reports from neighboring Thailand that pictures coming out of Mandalay are awful.
And those pictures show many parts of the city of 1.5 million in ruins. And efforts to free those trapped under the rubble have been hampered by a lack of heavy equipment and personnel. And time is running short for finding more survivors, especially with the temperature hovering near 100 degrees. And the smell of death, rescue workers say, is overpowering.
Michael Sullivan reporting. The quake also caused damage in Thailand, hundreds of miles away. At least 18 people there have been killed. Health officials in Gaza report that Israeli strikes have killed more than 85 Palestinians since the beginning of the Muslim holiday of Eid. That began yesterday, marking the end of Ramadan. While families typically celebrate the holiday, NPR's Anas Baba reports from Gaza instead, many parents were burying their children.
In a series of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza Strip last night, which occurred in the first day of the Muslims' holiday Eid, at least one entire family was killed, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Health officials said the victims included both parents and 3 children, aged between 3 and 8 years old. The Israeli military also ordered all Palestinians to evacuate the southern city of Rafah, as it expanded its military ground incursion there. The operation has so far led to the displacement of about 40,000 Palestinians, according to the Rafah municipality. This comes as the United Nations said it has helped recover the bodies for more than a dozen emergency responders killed by the Israeli military fire. Anas Baba, NPR News, Gaza City.
President Trump says he is not joking about potentially serving a third term in the White House. As NPR's Tamara Keith reports, the 22nd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says no one can be elected more than twice to the office of the presidency.
Trump told NBC's Kristen Welker that there are, quote, methods that could allow him to serve another term. Pressed on Air Force One, Trump said it's a long way off.
We have almost 4 years to go, and that's a long time. But despite that, so many people are saying, you've got to run again. They love the job we're doing. Most importantly, they love the job we're doing.
In an average of polls, Trump's approval rating is under 50%, but still better than he's seen before. Asked directly whether he's planning to leave office on January 20th, 2029, or if he's saying he might not, Trump declined to answer. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
On Wall Street, stocks are mixed. The Dow's up 24 points. The Nasdaq is down 300. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The number of families in emergency shelters has dropped dramatically after peaking at more than 7,600 households in Massachusetts in July of last year. According to the Herald, it's a level that had the system on the verge of overloading, and it drained hundreds of millions of dollars in cash that the state had set aside. The new number is 2,280. That's a 30% drop from a year ago. Officials say the reduced number of families in shelters is a result of new policies that put in place over the past year by Governor Maura Healey and members on the Democratic side of the legislature. But Republicans also point to the Trump administration's beefed up security at the southern border. Massachusetts is also on track to close hotels that have been used as temporary shelters by the end of this year. A federal judge on Saturday temporarily blocked the Trump administration's order from last week that sought to block Wilmer Hale, a law firm that has represented Harvard in several high-profile lawsuits, from doing government business. Judge Richard Leon ruled that the order, which would have terminated federal contracts from organizations that Wilmer Hale represents and restricted the company's access to federal buildings, was in violation of the First Amendment. Wilmer Hale lawyers are currently representing Harvard in a Title VI lawsuit filed by Harvard Divinity School graduate Alexander Shabus Kirstenbaum and 2 unnamed plaintiffs alleging that the university tolerated anti-Semitism. Trump's order also directed all federal agencies to investigate and terminate federal contracts with companies that disclose doing business with Wilmer Hale. 60 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include CFP, Certified Financial Planner Professionals, committed to acting in their clients' best interests. Learn more at letsmakeaplan.org. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
He is Tim Browdy. I am Marjorie Yeagan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with the former ambassador to Denmark, Rufus Gifford. He's going to tell us all about the Vance's visit to Greenland and what Trump is interested in Greenland.
He also worked for Harris and Biden, by the way. He was finance chair for Harris, and he was chief protocol for Joe Biden.
CNN's John King is going to tell us about those two big elections, one out in Wisconsin and one in Florida. Carol Rose from the ACLU. And on April 8th, Ask the Mayor, another edition. Michelle will be back at the Boston Public Library. No tickets needed. Hello again, Jim.
I think people know that, Marjorie. Hello, Marjorie. So about a week ago, Donald Trump signed an executive order titled Improving Education Outcomes by Empowering Parents, States, and Communities, directing his education secretary to essentially dismantle the education department. The department cannot legally be totally closed without congressional approval, but Trump is doing everything he can to shrink it to nothingness in his quest to dismantle much of the best of the federal government. We're joined now by Randi Weingarten. Randy's the president of the American Federation of Teachers, the second largest teachers union in the country, to discuss the impacts of a disappearing education department, assaults on collective bargaining in general, and a lot more. Randi, it's good to see you again. Welcome back.
It is always good to be with the two of you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Randi, for joining us. So tell us, from your perspective, what is most worrisome for the children of America with these massive cuts in the Department of Education?
The money and since we just started spring, baseball, the calling balls and strikes. And it's both of those things. And when I say the money and calling balls and strikes, look, you both know, that our union, when the department was first started, we were actually opposed to it. We thought it should stay in health, education, and welfare because we thought it was important to create some protective coding around kids with their parents. And we thought HEW was the way of doing it. So now, fast forward 20 some odd years later, 25 years later, or maybe actually 40 years later, what's happened is that the department has really gained an expertise on how we help kids, and particularly how we help kids who lack opportunity or who, have not had the field leveled for them. And the funding that Congress has passed, frankly, overwhelmingly, and the funding that goes disproportionately to red states is about opportunity. And so when you take that away, you're basically saying to Massachusetts, for example, you're taking away about $5,000 per kid. In terms of a place like Mississippi or Montana, you're taking 20% of the funds per kid. And so that is why that's why I'm up in arms, because how do you replace that? How do you replace the money for Title I or for kids with disabilities or kids who are getting Pell Grants or kids who are getting career tech ed? How do you replace that? And so that's number one. And number two is before, all these laws, whether it's Title I or whether it's...
Explain Title I to people, Randi, that don't know.
Thank you. Title I is basically it goes to 26 million kids. It's the money that goes to poor kids. And it goes to their schools. There's no bureaucratic taking of this money. It goes directly to schools, and it goes for things that help poor kids get an equal or an adequate education. So in Massachusetts, for example, it goes for after school, for summer school, for computer programming, to lower class size, for reading specialists, for librarians. So it goes to actually supplement the core education program, and it goes for the entire school if there are sufficient number of poor kids in a school, and it's 26 million kids. And so that's why, and it's the biggest education program. All of these together, Marjorie, aggregate to about $100 billion. And so like last week, we filed a lawsuit with various different school boards in Massachusetts. We filed in Massachusetts because Massachusetts has the best NAEP scores. and has the best scores in the nation. And so for Massachusetts to say, we need this money, it's really important. And the second thing the department does, the second big thing is, and look, I think we should be doing a whole lot more about anti-Semitism. And I think that, people have to understand that schools have to be welcoming and safe places for all kids. But we both know there's been lots of stories about kids not being welcoming and safe. And whether it be LGBTQ kids, whether it be kids with disabilities, whether it be Black kids, whether it be kids who are Latino, there have been discriminatory things that happen to kids. And so what happens is that the Department of Education calls balls and strikes. It says, no, school district, you can't do this. It actually says, no, teachers, you can't do this. No, principals, you can't do this. This is what is important for kids, and we have to lift it up, and we have to make sure all kids are treated, as kids who should be getting every bit of opportunity they deserve. So those are the two big reasons you have a Department of Education.
You're talking about stepping back from the calling of balls and strikes in a way that matters, meaning around civil rights issues, that sort of thing. I worry that they want to call balls and strikes on things they shouldn't. For example, when you look at the situation at Columbia, where before the total capitulation of the leadership at Columbia, they basically said, at least to me, we want to run Columbia. We're going to tell you what departments to put in receivership, even though it didn't go quite that far, what you can teach, et cetera. Why should we not assume that if they get away with this, the next step, despite all the rhetoric from the Trump administration about local state control and that sort of thing, are national dictates as to what can be taught, not taught, what books can be read, what can't be read, that sort of thing? Why should we think that's not coming?
It is coming. And Jim, everything that they're doing, let me just say, in the first 2 months, one day they're dismantling the department. The next day they're weaponizing it. So you're completely right. And, the issues in Columbia, I live in New York City. My wife actually is a Barnard grad, and we have friends that, have their kids at Columbia. So, there's a lot of things that school didn't do last year to keep kids safe, to keep particularly Jewish kids safe. But we've just sued the federal government. We represent AAUP and the faculty at Columbia. We just sued the federal government for taking $400 million in research grants and weaponizing the balls and strikes effort. First off, there's a process to do that. Don't weaponize it, and don't hurt others because you feel like anti-Semitism hasn't been addressed. You have to do both, and in a complex society like America, we can do both without weaponization.
We're talking to Randi Weingarten, National President of the American Federation of Teachers.
I was just thinking this is about the time that you get your college admissions for the following year, and an awful lot of people, because college is so expensive, go apply for federal grants. And that's one of the big things that's going to be affected.
That's the third thing, Marjorie. You're totally right. I should have used that as the third thing.
Well, that's
I just wanted to focus at the first two.
But
that's the third big thing.
That means there's no one to pick up the phone or tell you how to do it. God. They're very complicated. You need to be a genius to figure out these forms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can't figure it out.
No.
I've tried to do it for my nieces and nephews, and so let me just say this: you're totally right. The third thing, but it needs a bit of history here, is that in 2008, when the recession hit to 2008 to 10, when Obama became president, he actually moved. The Federal Department of Education always did some stuff about aid, but he moved everything about college assistance to the Department of Education. Congress passed it. He moved it there, made that suggestion. Congress passed it. So basically, the two things that the Federal Department of Education do, and it's millions of people that are affected. One is student aid. So instead of a kid and their parents filing a student aid application to, the number of colleges that they have applied to, there's one student aid application nationally that is used nationally. So it has been a huge benefit to parents to have one student aid application. They got rid of everybody in the department. So if you have a question, you can't get it answered. If you can't fill out the form, you can't get it answered. Thus, essentially making the servicing that the department does a total nullity. I think there's one person left. And the second thing
There's one person left.
One person
They're
left.
going to be very busy.
Yeah, this is what we mean by they made it a nullity. So, they're making sure that government can't work for parents at the very same time as they're saying, oh, we want to help parents. The second thing they're doing is for the 45 million people who get student loans to go to college and to stay in college and to pay them afterwards. They took the application off the website. So you couldn't apply for a student loan. You couldn't know where you were on it, how many more payments you have, what you need to do in terms of servicing. Could you imagine if that happened in the mortgage system, that like everybody just didn't know what to do, what the status of their mortgages were, or whether you could apply for a mortgage? They took it off. So we sued and said, what gives here? Yeah, you can't do this just because you don't want the department to have it. You can't actually, put 45 million people in the breach here. And so they've just, this is why when I said to Jim, the hypocrisy here, because they want it not to work and they want people to be angry. And then they're going to say, oh, that was Joe Biden's fault, or that was this one's fault, or that was that one's fault. They are crashing and breaking actually things that work. Should we strengthen schools? Yes. Do we need to do a lot of things differently? Yes. Should we be focused on schools being safe and welcoming, engaging and relevant? Yes. But here you got Massachusetts, #1 in the nation, who's saying, don't do this.
Randi Weingarten, we've talked about the fiscal and programmatic impacts of what Trump is attempting to do and is doing with you and others. What's the morale, what the trickle-down impact on morale of a person in a classroom when they turn on the news, when they go home at night after a really tough day being a shrink and a teacher and a whatever they have to do, and they see the most powerful person in the world is essentially trying to dismantle the education infrastructure in the country?
Well, just like the public, 65% are saying, don't do this. Our members overwhelmingly say, don't do this. This is basically telling Americans that your future doesn't count, that your education doesn't count, that what gives you opportunity doesn't count. And that's from, Jim, that's from people who, look, we've watched, and I've been around education for a long time. I taught in the 1990s when we had a lot more latitude before No Child Left Behind in terms of what we taught and how we taught. So people my members don't like bureaucracy, but they understand this is not about making bureaucracy more effective. This is about dismantling and abolishing what gives kids in America opportunity. And they are pissed about it. And they also understand that it's going to make their jobs harder, and it's going to hurt parents, and it's going to hurt kids, because how do you replace that money? How do you replace $1 out of every 9?
So what is the answer to that question? $2 billion, from what I read, $2 billion is federal funding is going to disappear from Massachusetts.
We know the answer
We've
already.
spoken to the governor about that.
You know the answer. It's $2 billion. What's going to happen? So is that either the services are getting cut, or alternatively, and I love this Ponzi scheme, or alternatively, districts are going to have to raise their property taxes to have these services. So you have kids in your district who have disabilities. They need paraprofessionals. They need occupational therapy. They need physical therapy. The money is cut. How are you going to replace those services? You either don't, or property taxes get raised.
And by the way, property taxes are much more likely to be raised in a wealthy community than they are in low and moderate income communities that are.
But even in low and moderate income communities, what do you do? Because these are services, when you're talking about, that's why everybody in schools kind of knows Title I, IDEA. I hate talking in acronyms, but they kind of know kids who are poor, kids with disabilities. But Title I goes basically to most schools in the country. Yeah. So you're basically saying that for tax cuts for the rich, or for this political program that Heritage wants, which is to get rid of opportunity for all kids, or for vouchers, which basically go to what we've seen in the voucher programs in the last few years. They basically go to rich parents, because those private schools that everybody wants to send their kids to, every time there's a voucher program in a state, those schools raise their tuition.
Talk about
get into them. It's basically this income redistribution. We're basically seeing income redistribution to rich folks from opportunities for poor folks.
We're talking
for middle class folks.
To Randi Weingarten, who runs the American Federation of Teachers. I want to ask you about vouchers, because there was a very interesting story about, I think it was Nebraska and Kentucky, both very red states, both very pro-Trump states, who voted overwhelmingly for Trump and overwhelmingly against vouchers. So was that the reason what was the reason? Ask you.
So what has happened is, I think in virtually every one of the voucher plebiscites that have been put to people in the last 40 years, they've all gone down. They've all been defeated. And so the last time, it was this last election in 24, it was Kentucky, Nebraska, and Colorado, and they were all defeated. And in Kentucky in particular, every single county, including all the counties that voted for Trump, voted against it. And the way people ran the campaign was simply, this is going to defund public schools, because the money was going from public schools to private schools. And the other side ran the campaign saying, we want parents to have all these choices. And we basically, with the governor and others, said, this is the money that's going to be taken out of your public schools if this goes forward.
But I don't understand how it can work, because a private school can be like 20, 30, 40 grand a year. So
that's exactly it.
So who's going to pay for this?
What's happened with the vouchers is, say they're $7,000 or $10,000.
Yeah, okay.
They never are enough for the Tony private schools that people would want to send their kids to. There's never, and what's happened in places like Arizona and Florida is that those schools, the private schools that parents have wanted to send their kids to, they raise their tuition. So a parent can't actually, if you can't already afford it, you're not going to afford it because of the voucher.
Okay.
So essentially what has happened in places like Florida and places like Arizona is that there's been a lot of homeschooling. There's a lot of ideological, there's a lot of reasons for homeschooling. And there's also been a bunch of different issues around how vouchers has been spent, like on Disney World, on some other things. But essentially what the data is showing, take Florida, lowest NAEP scores in 2 decades. I think it was in 2 decades. Lowest in 20 years. Sorry. I just wanted to get that right. They have a huge voucher experiment.
Hold on. People were using their vouchers to go take trips to Disney World? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
But so what's happened, it was like virtual charters. It's like, this is a way of helping, that there's a lot of push in the right wing about homeschooling. Look, if people want to homeschool, they have a right to homeschool their kids. If people want to send their kids to private school, they have a right to send their kids to private school. If people want to send their kids to religious schools, they have a right to do that. My job is making sure that everything we do in the public space is the best it can be. And so we know is we can't lose that funding. So the funding has been lost in Arizona. The funding has been lost in Florida. There's been a lot of levies in Florida, for example, to raise their own personal property taxes to replace some of the funding. You're starting to see this. But what we're also seeing is the following factors. 7 out of 10 of people who take vouchers have already have their kids in private schools. In Ohio and in Louisiana, which had accountability systems which actually looked at kids' performance in voucher schools versus kids' performance in public schools, we saw more learning loss after vouchers for kids' performance with kids who got vouchers in private schools than we saw in terms of COVID. And then also what I just said about Florida. Florida, who has one of the biggest voucher programs, basically has had the lowest NAEP scores in 20 years.
We're talking to Randi Weingarten. And by the way, yes, you are listening. You're bearing witness to an historic moment between Marjorie Egan and the president of the American Federation of Teachers. It's an incredibly civil...
We had a big back and forth about during the pandemic about keeping schools closed. And by the way, I think there is evidence now that we kept the schools closed too long. I mean, we can agree on that, I think,
you.
Right?
I totally agree with you, Marjorie. And I think that the problem, look, you and I know, and I wish I had a magic wand, and I wish we had better public health. You know, what I try, and it is, and look, Jim, I love having these conversations with you and Marjorie, and I think it's important, even when one disagrees on an issue, we have to find ways to have civic conversations so that people hear it and engage with each other. That's part of what's wrong.
I've been telling Marjorie that for years.
Let's have a civil conversation.
We're having a civil conversation.
Can I get into this conversation?
Hold on. As long as Randy
were closed for too long.
Yeah.
I tried to get the safety. I tried to get them open, and I tried to get them safe, and I don't have a magic wand, but you're right. And next time, if God forbid we have a next time, kids have to be front and center, and we have to all really fight for them to be the priority, and for us to actually make sure we have the conditions in schools so that schools can be open.
We're almost out of time here.
I have to want to get to
I'll sneak in first. A civil conversation about this. I don't know if we talked about this with you. Charter school expansion got absolutely crushed in Massachusetts. And the reason
people spoke, Marjorie, 60-40.
They did speak. And yet there are long lines that remain for waiting lists for charter schools in Massachusetts. And there's one in Lynn this morning, poor town. They don't have a lot of money. A lot of people want to get their kids out of the public school there into the charter school. But as people who oppose it say, you will lose money. You get paid for the first 3 years in Massachusetts. Then you start to lose money. But if it were not a money issue, would you feel differently? There is obviously in poor towns in Massachusetts, one of the richest states in the country, a huge demand for charter schools. So if it weren't a money issue, would you change your mind? Or would you allow kids to go and parents to send their kids to those schools?
They don't have the power to not allow.
Marjorie,
what?
Marjorie, I run a charter school in New York City, which has some of the best, as a union charter school. It has some of the best graduation rates there are.
So if it's a union charter school, that's okay?
No. That's my predecessor, Al Schenker, was one of the first people to raise charter schools. The issue is when you create them as pit against each other, as opposed to part of a big public system. And what's happened is that the competitive forces have pit them against each other. That's what happened, my understanding, in the Massachusetts referendum. That's what happened there. We actually now have about 300 charter schools, somewhere between, I think it's about 250, 275 charter schools where we represent the teachers.
So you're okay with them?
So I'm not. So the issue really is the funding issues.
Yeah.
The issue is you can't rob. I've been saying of late, you can't rob Peter to pay Elon. And that's the issue. You can't. How do you take a librarian? If you lose that money, take it in.
By the way, Title I money goes to libraries, by the way. We should make that clear.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? So we have to fight for the resources in the public schools instead of constantly being on this wheel of less and less resources or more and more sacrifice.
Yeah,
okay.
But there are more and more. There's more and more money going into the Boston schools all the time.
We only have actually we're running over, but I didn't want to miss this opportunity. As president of a huge and important labor union in America, Trump has also decided to target the labor movement and collective bargaining. He not only is going after the National Labor Relations Board and getting rid of Democratic members, he's signed an executive order. I don't know if he has the legal power to do this, to bar collective bargaining for employees who work at national security agencies. I'm assuming, again, this is just the beginning of the end.
It's a line.
What's that?
It's a line in the sand. And even, what you've seen is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, let me finish the question.
Mm-hmm.
Is the labor movement ready for, I have to say, I wake up this morning, the UAW that I used to be a member of is praising Donald Trump for his tariffs, which, may help their members, but not exactly helping the cause, I should say, in the average American. And I haven't seen the labor movement really stand up in a loud and forceful way around Trumpism, and this is cutting right to the core. Am I missing something?
So I would say that just like first off, the labor movement is standing up to this and to so much else of, let me not call it Trumpism. Let me say the labor movement is standing up for opportunity and for people to have a better life. I think just like the general public, the opposition right now is different than it was in 2017. In 2017, Trump didn't win the popular vote, and people basically said, from the beginning, this is not what we wanted or elected. This time, Trump, even though there was no mandate, Trump won the popular vote, and he significantly won the Electoral College. And so I think what's happened is that you're seeing basically an opposition based upon what he's doing as opposed to what we feared. People didn't believe us when we said what we feared. And so April 5th, this Saturday, the hands-off rallies are going to include a fight against taking away the freedom to contract. How can Elon Musk have the freedom to contract, but a person who works in a VA hospital doesn't have it? And frankly, this whole issue about, quote, national security, with all due respect, that is what that's what dictators use to take away rights. I mean, how do you get rid of the collective bargaining of 1 million people who work for the federal government? How do you get rid of it for all those TSA workers who protect us in airports? This is about taking away people's freedom. And so you're going to see more and more. I don't want to Liz Schuler from the FL and many of us are talking about the actions we take beyond the courts. And you saw us, we had 2,000 actions a couple of weeks ago in terms of cutting the school budgets. And you have to be on the streets. So many of us are going to be participating on April 5th. Many of us are going to be participating on May 1st. Many of us have been outside Social Security offices. And I think you're going to see more and more and more because people want a better life. They didn't sign up for this, whether they voted for Trump, whether they voted for Harris, or equally important, whether they stayed on the couch. People did not want in America. People don't want in America things to get worse, not better. And I'll say one more thing. We started this republic almost 250 years ago. This is one of the most enduring democracies. I think you're going to see a lot of people on the street saying, no, do not take our democracy away. Do not take our rights, our freedoms away. And I think you're going to see a lot more people on the street in the next few weeks.
Randi Weingarten, it's great to see you and talk to you as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for joining us. We've been speaking with Randi Weingarten, who is president of the American Federation of Teachers, and we very much appreciate her time. Thank you. Up next, we're going to open the lines for a personal economic check-in. The Washington Post says more Americans are spending less. Trump's big tariff day of liberation is on Wednesday. What do you think? How's your pocketbook? How's your economic certainty or uncertainty? Stick around. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7, GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Oysters play a critical role in filtering pollutants out of seawater. In Australia, scientists are researching how well they'll be able to do that as the ocean gets warmer.
We've taken them all the way up to 33 degrees Celsius. They didn't like it so much, but they were still filtering at about half of their usual capacity.
That story next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And MIT Sloan Executive Education. You can equip yourself with the skills to lead in a rapidly changing world. Courses cover AI, leadership, and data-driven strategy. More at executive.mit.edu. And GM Roth Design Remodeling. Dreams delivered. With custom kitchens, bathrooms, and additions. Serving New England for over 39 years. Learn more at gmroth.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan, Jim Browdy. We're streaming youtube.com/GBH News at the library tomorrow, Wednesday and Friday. Finishing up our conversation with Randi Weingarten. Somebody texted, any chance I can use my voucher towards tickets for the library? The answer is sure. Bring your voucher. Present it to Marjorie, not a problem. So non-essential purchases are on the downswing across economic statuses. Is that a word? Stati? Whatever. In America, reports the Washington Post today. The wealthiest among us are rethinking their spending, a massive indicator for the economy, since the highest earning 10% of Americans have been driving the economy's post-pandemic boom, accounting for nearly half of all spending. But are you among the 90% of Americans who've been feeling the squeeze for months? How have your spending habits changed as we lurch towards Trump's so-called Liberation Day of tariffs on Wednesday? It's really, even though he says he, quote, couldn't care less about foreign car prices going up. And he doesn't mention, by the way, what's likely to be price gouging by American-made cars who are going to use the opportunity to raise their prices too. In any case, what do you make of the squeeze? Are you okay paying more to support his vision, whatever that is? Give us a call or a text. It's an economic check-in. We do it every few months, and we thought this week was particularly important in light of the fact that, again, Liberation Day gives me hives, is Wednesday. 877-301-8970. Here's some good news. A CBS News poll, Marjorie, says 64% of America, that's a huge number, say Trump's not doing enough to bring prices down. 55% saying too much reliant on tariffs. That's a pretty good indication of the fact that people are actually paying attention to this, don't you think?
Yeah, but half of them still approve overall of what he's doing.
Yeah, I know they do.
Dean Ashland says she's discovered that she really likes rice and beans, so some savings there on her budget. And Brian in Paxton says, I'm unable to call because I'm driving, but we have absolutely changed our spending habits. We've lost about $90,000 in our retirement savings, and now the threat of Social Security and tampering.
You know, for whatever it's worth, you know what the average car that's made overseas, the price, and I think it's roughly 50% of cars in this country are made overseas. You know what the price increase is going to be?
I do not.
Average of $9,000 they're talking about.
That's big.
And a huge percentage of cars that are, quote, made in America use foreign parts. They're going to be tariffed.
I saw that.
Too.
The parts had to be made
they
here,
tariff
too. Yeah, that's going to be a big deal. And by the way, Shirley Lung has got a column today quoting all the people who thinks that things are going very well under Trump. He quotes Robert Hale, who's Granite Telecommunications. That's the guy you go and get your hair shaved off.
I used to get my head shaved, yeah.
Yeah, he thinks fine. She got some tow truck driver, company owner who says he's all excited. He's gone out and bought 2 more.
What's your point?
Tow truck. Well, a lot of business people. Jay Cashman, he's a famous guy in Boston. What would you call him? A developer, I guess?
I'd say,
real estate guy or something?
Yeah, what's he say?
Anyway, he said he likes the idea of bringing in billionaire businessman Elon Musk to disrupt government and make it more efficient, says Cashman. I think the world of Elon Musk is a different perspective. So there you go.
Well, that is a different perspective. So is Jay Cashman's. 877-301-8970. I love when people who aren't affected by the worst of what's happening saying how much they like about what has happened. Is there any sympathy shown for low and moderate income people who are not so thrilled with the Muskism? Is there any of that in there?
Bruce Mittman, CEO of Nimbin Advertising.
We know him.
Yep.
The radio business.
He says universities, institutions, environmental groups getting large amounts of funding. That's not really how the economy works. Government is there to support us, help us grow. He says he thinks the last administration was picking winners and losers.
Oh, he knows what he's talking about. The government's not about the environment. Why would we worry about breathing and drinking clean water, Bruce?
Well,
That's
Shirley,
an excellent point.
We'll talk to Shirley more extensively about this column, but that was
she
a column.
didn't say it. They said it.
They said it to her.
How do you like him saying, can I get back to this for 1 second, then we're going to get to your calls? No, not him. Trump. Quote, he says this on the phone, I guess, to Kristen Welker from Meet the Press.
Right.
I couldn't care less about foreign price. There was a rumor, she asked him about him calling the automakers, said, don't raise your prices. He denies that and says, I couldn't care less about prices going. I want to be clear what I was saying a minute ago. Let's assume the average price of a foreign car goes up $9,000. Do you think the American manufacturer is going to say, hey, They can buy my car for $9,000 less. No, they're going to say, let's do a little price gouging. I'll raise my price by $6,000. It'll still be cheaper than the foreign car, but I'll make more money. I mean, really? 877-301-8970. But the good news is he's going to bring prices down on day one. Let's go to Eliza in Cape Cod. We're doing an economic check-in. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. I'm so happy to talk to you guys.
Well, we're happy to talk to you, we think. Hi.
So I'm a server on the Cape at like a high-end restaurant.
Yep.
And we usually book out months in advance. Lots of our customers are international and have been just dropping out left and right because they made America a very toxic place to vacation.
Yeah.
So my entire industry right now is freaking out. All the hotels, all the resorts, all the restaurants, we don't know what to expect because a huge portion of our people come from out of the country.
Yeah,
well,
a lot
let me
of
tell
them
you,
are Canadians.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think I heard this morning that close to 75%, I think I got the number right. If one of you guys can check this in the control room, I think it's 75% of plane reservations that have been booked from Canada have either been canceled or the expectation not met.
Yeah, they're taking it very seriously.
Yeah,
the Canadians
they are.
don't want to be the 51st state, and they're ticked off about it. There was a great piece, Eliza, up in Maine.
don't go away.
Up on some of the, Kennebunkport, Gunkwit,
right, I heard that,
Portland.
yeah.
Same thing. People that have been in business for years, catering to a mostly Canadian audience in the summertime.
So
people are canceling.
Are you and your coworkers worried about your jobs?
Oh, desperately. And on top of that, my chef uses lots of interesting ingredients that are going to cost a lot more as the tariff hit. So I don't even know how they're going to price things. Like the food itself is going to cost more, and we're going to be losing a huge part of our people.
Hey, Eliza, keep checking in with us, will you? We're curious to know how things go. Good luck to you and your colleagues down there on the Cape. 877-301-8970 is the number. As I said, 55% think too much reliance on the tariffs. And can you answer a question, May, since you're an economic expert?
Oh, yeah.
Well, at least as good as I am. I'm surprised the number's not higher. Is the fact that I guess 40% or thereabouts say the tariffs are okay, is that because they're buying the notion that somewhere down the line this is going to spur manufacturing in this country? I mean, is that what the argument is?
It's short-term pain for long-term gain.
I got
and
it.
the notion that we're going to bring back a lot of manufacturing to the United States. I don't know.
How soon are auto plants going to be opening in the United States? It wouldn't have opened otherwise.
Well, I think it's going to take them a long time.
Yeah, and during that time, you're going to be paying more for almost anything. And by the way,
that's assuming they still do come. And a lot of people think that even if they do come, it's all going to be robots and AI anyway, so it's not going to be jobs.
Didn't Trump also say this weekend, again, you never know because he goes back and forth, that these tariffs are going to be permanent, meaning this is not a short-term kind of deal. So that's good news, too. Let's go to Ian in Newport, as in Rhode Island. Welcome, Ian. Hi.
Hey, how's it going? I just want to say I love your guys' show. I listen all the time when I'm out at sea, when I get in.
Whoa!
Wait!
What are you doing out at sea?
Fisherman.
Are you?
So I just got back from a squid trip. I got to go down right now to the boat to put some more gear on to go fish for another species called mugfish, which we export to Korea. And I just wanted to see if you guys had any information on, whether this will have a drastic effect on fish prices and or, the export, of certain species of fish.
Ian, that's a great question, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't know. Do you know, Jim?
No, but we're going to check it out and try to get it to you before noon.
Yeah, we'll try to find out. Yeah, so while you have a chance to still listen, our crack staff is on it. We have a lovely picture of the monkfish right in front of us here.
By the way, Ian, does not solve your problem, but a lot of people think monkfish is a cheap alternative to steak. Do you buy that?
No, so we call it poor man's lobster.
I'm sorry. I meant lobster. I'm sorry. I meant lobster.
Yeah, no, it's all right.
It does taste like lobster, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It sort of has the texture of it. Depends on the way you cook it. But, I think it's a very unappreciated fish because of the way it looks and its storied history. But I think it's delicious.
Okay, before you go away, we're going to do better than this, but I just did a quick look. South Korea's average tariff on non-agricultural products is more than twice that of the United States. And since we are in a retaliatory mood, I would assume the tariffs are going to go up, and that means theirs will go up. But we're going to try to get you a better answer than my speculation. So stick around at least till noon, and we'll do our best. Thank you very much.
So far, we have that Canada and China are the two top export destinations.
Yeah, but he's talking about
United
South
States
Korea.
seafood.
He's talking about South Korea. Hey, Ian, good luck to you, and stay in touch with us. We really appreciate your call. He's squidding, as he said out there, and now monkfish. You don't eat either, right? Because that's too bad.
No, I don't.
Squid's great. Monkfish is
A lot of
fabulous.
people are texting about the same thing. Jen from Holsinger, just one of them. I'm wondering why we should pay federal taxes anymore, where the feds won't give the money to the institutions.
Well,
one good thing about cheating on your taxes, they've cut the IRS considerably, so it's going to take them longer to find you.
Did you read Drudge this weekend, by the way? Drudge had a link to a story that was quite interesting, that shockingly, Trump might end up not cutting taxes for the wealthy, but raising taxes on the wealthy. The theory going, even though he promised otherwise to extend the tax cuts, Trump tax cuts, that he wouldn't lose those votes anyway because they want to use that money, theoretically, I think it's a trial balloon, to fund the elimination of taxes on tips, which would be wildly expensive, but also wildly popular.
Right.
And a huge
and taxes
sector
on Social Security.
Well,
be
that
even
is,
more
I didn't
popular.
hear that included in this.
I didn't read that either.
Category.
But it's hard to get if wealthy people who've been doing a little fancy dancy on their taxes because they have really good lawyers, and the government has to go after those really good lawyers, and it's easier for them to go after people who don't have good lawyers.
Let's go to...
Yes, Marjorie just said one good thing about cheating on your taxes. I don't recommend it. Let me tell you that.
No, you're not.
I don't.
By the way, a lot of them do legal sort of dancing around that is not technically illegal, and some do.
And that's one of the arguments a few years ago about how there should be more money given to the IRS so they could hire better legal talent to go after the big-time tax cheaters, millionaires and billionaires, and that didn't happen. I don't know why the Republicans are opposed to getting good lawyers at the IRS. I'm not sure. Why do you think that is, Jim?
Why do you think that is? Because who do they audit? I mean, I was audited twice, 2 years in a row, years ago.
Yeah.
But generally, someone of my income, even though I'm upper middle income, is not audited. The people who they audit are the wealthiest people, and the fewer auditors they have, the fewer audits of wealthy people there are.
You were the tax man. That's why they audited you, Jim.
Maybe
George from Danvers, thank you for calling.
Hi.
Hi.
One comment, and that is that the Canadians have it right. If you don't hit these people in the pocketbook, you're not going to get their attention.
Yeah.
And we have to do everything we can to take money out of their pockets.
And how's it going to help us again?
It's going to help us by telling them that we got a message. We have to control the money. As long as they're making money, they don't care. It's all about greed and power. And if the Canadians can cancel airplane flights, we should be able to cancel subscriptions to Amazon and cancel our subscription to Truth Social and let them. Burning a couple of Teslas is not going to get the job done.
I'm not following you, George. Are you saying? What is your point? I'm sorry. Maybe it was my point, denseness.
My point is that the Canadians have it right.
Oh, okay.
By canceling their airplane tickets.
Yeah, okay.
Canceling their vacations. These people in Washington understand nothing but greed and power.
Okay, so you're saying,
I got it now.
And you're saying Canadians are doing a good job, and we're not doing such a good job at retaliating.
Damn right.
Yeah, George, that's a great
Before
point.
you take a
Sorry,
break,
it took me a while to get it. Thank
Can
you for the call.
do some potential bad news for Ian there, the fisherman? It was Ian, right? Yeah.
Yes.
South Korea, this is a Reuters story. South Korea plans, whoops, I just lost that, emergency response over U.S. tariffs on autos. I forgot, of course, we get cars from South Korea. They're planning retaliation. I have no idea if it's going to be on the importation of fish, but I would stay on top of that, Ian, if I were you. But that's the consequence of tariffing and responding to tariffing.
877-301-8970. We're asking you how you feel about your pocketbook at this present moment. We're waiting for the impact of more tariffs. Inflation is not bad. It was down now about 2.8 or something like that.
But it went up last month.
Yeah, so it's not terrible. But how are you feeling about this? How are you feeling about all the cuts to the federal bureaucracy, particularly if you are a member of the federal bureaucracy. 877-301-8097. This is Boston Public Radio.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Rebels, Rights, and Revolution. A new exhibition at Massachusetts Historical Society charts the major Massachusetts moments in the first year of the American Revolution. Plus, the corn-fed, Tony Award-winning musical Shucked comes to Boston. We talk to the Cobb father behind it, playwright Robert Horn, who wrote the book for Shucked. That and more on The Culture Show, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the Lyric Stage, presenting the world premiere of The Great Reveal. Emotions escalate and revelations are shared at a backyard gender reveal party that tests the love of a family. April 4th through April 27th. Tickets at lyricstage.com. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, Outliers author Malcolm Gladwell, and freed Russian political prisoner Vladimir Kara-Murza. bostonspeakers.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Margery Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday. We're doing what we do occasionally here, an economic check-in. We thought this was a good time to do it because Wednesday is deemed by Donald Trump as Liberation Day, because that's when the 25% tariffs on imported cars and parts for cars from foreign nations that are assembled here will be tariffed at 25%. 877-301-8097. You know, one piece of good news, by the way, do you know the price of eggs is coming down like dramatically, absolutely dramatically.
That's good.
Yeah, it is.
That's absolutely
You seem
good.
to be dismissing that.
No, I'm not dismissing. I haven't bought any eggs in a while, so
I'm sorry to hear that.
I got 2 dozen eggs a couple of weeks ago. They're
that's
probably
great.
going to expire pretty soon.
Great.
But that is great. So we're skiing at Jay Peak this weekend. Usually they see lots of Canadians, not many this time. A lot of people think there's going to be trouble this summer getting workers from foreign countries. A lot of people come here during the summer to Cape Cod. That's a big deal.
On those visas, I know. It happened a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things, I want to echo what that caller who we at first didn't understand but made a wonderful point. The Canadians are actually doing something with their anger at the United States. What are we doing? With our
well, there's going to be a rally on Saturday, and a lot of people are
Randi Weingarten mentioned that.
A lot of people are very excited about it, and the hope is that there's going to be more pushback. The hope is that there's going to be more pushback by some of these big law firms and some of these colleges. We
couple of law firms did go to court challenging
they did go
this.
To court.
By the way, Skadden Arps. We originally did the law firm that did $40 million. Skadden Arps did $100 million for a slush fund for Trump's favorite causes to get free legal
and
representation.
You know what's going to be interesting? Is he going to send them out to represent cases where they're kind of screwing LGBTQ people or they're screwing people in diversity cases? And are those lawyers going to take those cases? I mean, we know everybody's entitled to a defense in this country, but I think it's hard because sometimes it's very hard to represent certain people in law.
If you want to read something really embarrassing, and I get off on these things, the letter, what's his name, Brad Karp? The guy who's the lead lawyer at Paul Weiss, wrote to his colleagues in the firm that obviously got out about why it was such a great thing that he pulled off by capitulating, he doesn't use that word, to the Trump administration and giving him $40 million for Trump's favorite causes to be represented. It is really, talk about language torture. It is just humiliating.
I know. And wait till you see the causes he wants them to defend.
I'm sure. So. Kevin in Lakeville, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling. Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
You were talking earlier about, let's face it, you really can't avoid conversations about what the economy might be flipping over into. But I think it's a very basic point, but I mean, this presidency represents the upper echelon of our economy. These people that have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't think that they'd be adverse at all to the fact that this country could get thrown into a recession, because it's just going to making them easier to buy more things and acquire more wealth.
Well, what do you mean? Like when stocks start tanking, then people that have money dive in and buy those?
Or when real estate, when houses start coming up on the market, like look what's happening in Florida. I mean, I'm sorry I can't cite other examples, more concrete examples, but I mean, the economy is going to start really going pretty badly, and
well, it's not just the economy.
People that are going to benefit from it.
It's not just the economy, Kevin. No. I'm sorry, but it's not just the economy. We spoke to Randi Weingarten at the top of the show today, the president of the American Federation of Teachers. Those cuts to special ed and support for low and moderate income kids in public schools is, for the most part, not going to affect the top 5% of wealth in this country. It's going to affect everybody else. So that's not just, again, the financial end of things, but it's the whole spectrum of things that Elon Musk and Donald Trump have decided to target. So I think you make an excellent point, and thanks for making it. Thanks for the call.
I thought her voucher point was great, too.
Yeah.
The only people that are going to be able to make use of vouchers go to private schools are people that can afford it. I mean, if the vouchers are $7,000, the school costs $20,000, you're not going to be able to go unless you got that kind of money.
And she said a lot of the people who took the vouchers were already in private schools anyway, so they didn't need the vouchers. Melissa in Rhode Island, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
The thing about my pocketbook and everybody's pocketbook, I'm retired and I'm watching well, it's not a 401k anymore, but my investments with my my Schwab account. I lost $56,000 2 weeks ago in one day, and I haven't looked since then. I just can't stop throwing up.
Yeah, that's my strategy. Don't look.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you can't look, but the instability of, I talked to my guy, the instability of the market, what's going on every day. Wall Street doesn't like that. The people don't like it either. And I'm tired of that. This man and this dictator we have doesn't care about the people at all. We know this.
Well, it's interesting. As you know, Melissa, I'm not the first one. He used to talk about the stock market almost every day in his first term. And he says now he hardly ever looks at it, which obviously is not true because he knows it's not doing well. And while people generally say only 50% of the population have money in the stock market, that's also 50% of the population without the only there, including a lot of retirees like you who are nervous, and thanks for your call, that the typical rebound that always happens is not going to happen in time for them. So I listen, I'm with you. I don't understand why he thinks this is going to benefit him, but obviously he does.
Here's John from Ashland. I work managing federal research funds at Harvard Medical School. Mass stands to lose hundreds of millions of dollars, killing basic science, which only happens at the university level. Terrible. And then here's
by the way, it's not going to happen to Harvard because they're firing people. They got rid of the Middle East department guy because obviously they hope that's going to cause their federal funding not to disappear.
Well, I think the research is good.
But I think they think they're making a deal like Columbia made with.
More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Trinity Rep, presenting La Tempestad.
A third term. In an interview with NBC News, Trump was asked whether he has been presented with plans to allow him to seek a third term. Trump said, quote, "There are methods which you could do it," end quote. But as NPR's Tamara Keith notes, Trump faces one major hurdle, the U.S. Constitution.
There are actually two amendments that would stand in his way. The 22nd Amendment is one of those. It was put in place after FDR served 4 terms. Separately, the 12th Amendment prevents anyone disqualified constitutionally from being the president from being the vice president.
NPR's Tamara Keith. This week, Trump's 25% tariffs on all imported cars and parts are set to take effect, and Trump says he will also announce a new wave of tariffs. NPR's Amy Held reports it comes as consumers grow more worried about the economy.
Aman Singh manages a Toyota dealership in New York. He says people keep calling, concerned about pricier cars.
We've been telling them, hey, listen, if you pick something I have here, it's that price.
He'll appeal the verdict. Rescue teams from India, Russia, and China have arrived in Myanmar, where more than 2,000 people are dead after a massive earthquake last Friday. Missing up to now are teams from the U.S. because it cuts to foreign aid. Here's NPR's Emily Fang.
The U.S. historically has been at the forefront of sending humanitarian teams and foreign aid to countries experiencing disaster. But after a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit Myanmar with shocks reverberating across the border to neighboring Thailand, China has provided much of the initial relief, giving it a much more central role in global aid work in the absence of the U.S. China sent a team that rescued 6 people, including a child, from a collapsed building in Mandalay, where there's a strong ethnic Chinese-Burmese population as well. The Trump administration has gutted USAID, the aid agency that's been used to mobilize humanitarian teams quickly, and the administration terminated nearly all of its staff. Emily Fang, NPR News.
It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Environmental activists and members of the Wampanoag Nation are organizing to try to stop construction of a planned business park in Plymouth. They say the development would harm the environment and threaten tribal culture artifacts and possible burial grounds. The Cape Cod Times reports a construction company has cleared out 33 acres of what was once part of the Great Lot land that had been set aside for the Wampanoags in the 1600s. The project on Hedges Pond Road abuts tribally owned land called Dana Path, and that tribe says the proper archaeological surveys are needed to protect Wampanoag heritage. Tribal members and other petitioners are seeking a cease and desist order through the Plymouth Zoning Board of Appeals, which is expected to review this request on April 7th. Well, good news for lovers of Nantucket's prized bay scallops. The State Division of Marine Fisheries has approved Nantucket's request to extend the bay scalloping season through April 7th. The normal bay scalloping season would be ending today, March 31st, but thanks to an abundance of those scallops in the harbors, the extension was granted. The current reports that the extension includes both commercial and recreational scalloping. Oh boy, saute them, broil them, deep fry them, or just eat them raw like sashimi. They are delicious. Red Sox open a 3-game series with the Orioles in Baltimore today, 2:35 start. Celtics in Memphis tonight. Gang Green has won 8 in a row. 63 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from Drexel University, whose cooperative education program positions students to explore future careers and discover their ideal profession before graduation. This is experiential education. More at drexel.edu.
Hey, it's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. The mayor of Boston is going to be with us at the Boston Public Library on April 8th, and we're going to be back there tomorrow with a really great show.
And one of the things, the former ambassador of Denmark is going to be there, so we'll have an opportunity to talk about the situation with Greenland. And Rufus Gifford, who is that former ambassador, also is the finance chair for Kamala Harris's campaign, was the chief protocol for Joe Biden, so he was around him for a while, so we got a lot of things to talk about. And John King will join us from CNN on a day of 2 huge elections in Florida and a judge election in Wisconsin. In early February, El Salvador's president, self-styled as the world's, quote, coolest dictator, agreed to take some of Trump's deportees and house them in El Salvador for a fee. The deal means American money is being spent to house detainees internationally in one of the most notorious and dangerous prison complexes in the world. The Trump administration is currently in court defending the lack of due process for these people. They're citing the Alien Enemies Act. It's likely to go to the Supreme Court, and I'm sure you remember an appellate judge who initially ordered the deportations to stop had this to say about the treatment of Venezuelan deportees.
There were plane loads of people. There were no procedures in place to notify people. Nazis got better treatment under the Alien Enemy Act.
Her point is even gang members are entitled to due process. Photojournalist Philip Holsinger watched on a tarmac in El Salvador while many of these detainees from America arrived in El Salvador. He described the transfer in Time magazine, where you can see some of his absolutely stunning photography, as the crossing of an ancient continent. Philip, it's a pleasure to have you, and congratulations on your work.
Thank you.
And when I first saw your pictures, I was absolutely horrified. So tell us what you saw. Describe what you saw from the Venezuelans on the plane to coming down into the tarmac. And we'll get to the prison eventually, but tell us what you saw.
Well, I've been here for over a year working on this story. So I've experienced a lot of transfers, mostly inter-country transfers from prison. These are, convicted, sentenced, MS-13, Barrio 18 murderers. This was the first time that I had been with foreigners coming here. I think it was the first time foreigners had been shipped to El Salvador. And so I had a certain expectation, which I, wrote about. I expected a lot more tattoos, a lot more tough guys. And but when they came off the plane, and these guys had hard faces, but they clearly did not look like other gang members that I've been accustomed to in here and around the world. They had a sense of shock about them. They didn't know where they were. I was actually able to be on the plane, on two of the different planes as soon as they landed. So I was able to be with them from inside the plane all the way to inside their cells in Sakat.
Can you describe what for lack of a better expression, what the welcoming committee was like there on the tarmac, Philip?
Well, there are sort of there are different layers to this story. As the thing is complicated, at first sight for anybody, it looks dystopian. I mean, it's literally Zero Dark 30 when they start kind of bringing them off the plane, and it feels like the movie. There are maybe 500 police officers, and I say police officers, but these are the elite. Some Jaguar, that's one of their elite services, in black riot gear. And then there's a contingency of soldiers as well, which create what they call fence around the whole place. So maybe 1,000 people that were involved just at the airport. And so it's very methodical, extremely well organized, but it heightens that sense of dystopia because everything is in order. The soldiers are lined up, the police are lined up, and this is not a quiet affair. I mean, this is a big affair.
And we should be clear, you said about 1,000 people in law enforcement and affiliated things, roughly 250 to 300 people coming off the planes, 240 of them roughly Venezuelans. How did you get access to the tarmac to begin with, Philip? How were you able to be there?
So I've been here working on this story, and as you know, as journalists, you build trust, and I have a reputation of being just a straight person. I'm very much underground. I work very long on stories. They take me years to work on. So I've gotten to know the security apparatus well and the people. And they, there was a total media blackout. It was just a government team allowed to be there. So part of it is just field craft. It's, people, they're familiar with you. And, and so I went and then you kind of go until you're told not to go anymore. And I just kept walking,
and got some incredible footage. By the way, I think you mentioned in one of these pieces I read that soldiers and cops lined the whole 25-mile route to the prison. So was this special because they were coming from America and they were these Venezuelans under the Trump administration, or is this what they usually do?
No, this is standard operating procedure for the transfer of soldiers. And usually when there's an internal country transfer, it's in the realm of 2,000 inmates that'll be being moved. A lot of buses. The traffic, of course, you can imagine is I call it demented, but it's typical. So these transfers have to happen at night, and they have a very well-oiled methodology for it here. So part of that is just security, is that from the moment these inmates leave a prison to when they enter Sakat, everything is guarded. And but for the and that's why I sort of made note of that. The context of that in the timepiece was that for an El Salvadoran, they understand this, but for these Venezuelan guys, I can't say what they were thinking. But, to be greeted by hundreds of military and police, and then to be taken, across rural roads that are lined with floodlights and soldiers, had to have appeared strange.
By the way, Sakat, that Philip is mentioning is that terrorism confinement center, the legendary prison there. Before you tell us, share a couple of stories about some of the men who were chained and taken to this prison. Can you describe why did the president of El Salvador cut this deal with Trump to do it? I know he's wildly popular there. I was going to say despite suspending a lot of civil liberties, but maybe because of the suspending a lot of civil liberties, which led to him reining in a lot of the gangs. But why did he cut the deal with Trump in your estimation, Philip?
So I'm sort of registering the layers of your question. Sort of the big picture is, the country before, and I've learned this over a year now, is I didn't expect it. And I've been in places, dangerous places all over the world. I didn't understand that the gangs had controlled the entire country. Mm-hmm. They did so with the murder protocol. That's given me nightmares.
What does that mean?
They have, among their stations in MS-13, they have a role called, to be graphic, I apologize, but they call them the master of dismemberment. Yeah. And this person is essentially a murder surgeon. Their job is to, you can just figure the word, they're the master of dismemberment. And the gang members ruled the country with the type of terror that everybody was locked down in their houses. It was really extraordinary. And so the measures to defeat the gang were based on that murderous background. I can't tell you the details of the deal with the United States. It's above my pay grade. I know what I've read. I do know that it's expensive for El Salvador to take care of prisoners, and maybe there was some economic trade in that it helps them to, pay for their own incarceration. But that's sort of above my pay grade.
So tell us, before you get to the individual stories, just from what I saw, pictures of men in underwear with lots of tattoos, very close together in a small space, people's heads being shaved. I didn't know if that's what
chained.
They normally, changed, hands and feet shackled around their waist. Again, is this what usually happens there, or was this a special deal for these Venezuelans?
So not to make light of anything, but and I spend a lot of time in these environments around the world, that the incarceration and the movement of incarcerated people, especially people who are deemed extremely dangerous, protocol in any prison, United States is usually like a 5-point shackle, which is hands and feet and then chained together. So part of that is just so that a person can't move, can't rise up, can't, and then there are body postures, which are standard for moving a dangerous person from one space to another. Again, they're uncomfortable and painful. And so a lot of the things that you see are actually standard operating procedure in any, fair prison in the world. And I think that there is an opportunity to abuse those positions, meaning bent bodies and chains, and to use those to, cause unusual pain. But at what you're seeing in general is sort of standard operating procedure. But there is definitely a sense of theater to it, which I wrote about, and part of it is, and again, to the stated purpose on the El Salvadoran side and similar prisons, not in the United States, because this is not allowed in the U.S. The stated purpose is that they want to shock a person to not even thinking they can stand up. And one of the things that had happened that night was there were 3 planes, and I limited my time to what I'll call plane number 2 and plane number 1. That was the order of their landing. And plane number 2 was where only Venezuelans and 1 El Salvadoran were on. And I made that my main focus. And on plane number 2, the Venezuelans tried to overthrow the plane. Yeah. And that was according to Homeland Security. But I actually went on the plane. I was there at the tail end of it because somebody told me it was happening. So I literally ran through the soldiers and police and ran up the gangway and onto the plane. And so they they gave instructions specifically based on that to say, make it harder on these guys and let them know they're not in control.
Okay.
Philip was running onto the plane. I'd be running the other direction, I should say. That describes the difference right here. Philip Holsinger, you can see and read his brilliant work around this landing in Time magazine. As you know, a number of families of these Venezuelans have said not only did they commit no crimes in the United States, they committed no crimes anywhere. They're not gang members. Some clearly are. Could you describe the situation with this guy who suggested, I'm a gay guy, I'm a barber, I have nothing to do with this? Describe that scene to us if you can, Philip.
Well, again, the way that I do my work is very unusual, I think, today. But it's not unusual. I didn't study photography or journalism. I studied math. And my interest is in a raw fact, and my hero is W. Eugene Smith and the original Life magazine photo essayist. And I aim to bring a person into the moment. Mm-hmm. And what struck me about those claims, people claim innocence all the time in incarceration. You learn, or I've learned, that there are different sounds that people make when they're in a bad situation. And I've said, to quote myself, there's a difference between a whimper and a growl. And many of these gang members growl. And this one guy caught my attention because it didn't correlate with his situation. If somebody is treating you harshly and manhandling you and pushing you down in that environment, I don't think that I would make up a story that I'm a gay barber or a gay stylist as my means of argument to try to persuade this person not to hit me. So that struck me, and it doesn't mean he's innocent, but it struck me as something I wanted to record. You can't record that on your camera. So I had to write what I heard because, it begs investigation. And I believe the El Salvadorans have actually made it a priority to find out, if they've received people that maybe weren't vetted as fully as they expected. In El Salvador, the crackdown, as you noted, is wildly popular. And what's astounded me is that even family members of many of the gang members incarcerated say they love the president because they're safe. It's strange. But when they began to arrest El Salvadoran gang members, they had collected 76,000 files. They had deep information on their crimes. And I think when the planes landed, I think the El Salvadorans, I can't speak for them, but I think they were a little surprised that files didn't come with these guys. They just received 3 manila folders, one from each plane with, some basic papers for each of the guys.
Well, Donald Trump has said there was, quote, very strong vetting. News reports subsequently have said the vetting was not very strong at all.
I don't know, obviously, if this is true, but Mother Jones has reported that people that have talked with the families and lawyers for the families, they claim that of 10 men detained in El Salvador, they claim that they had no connection to these gangs, but they had a lot of tattoos, and that's how they wound up in this situation. I have no idea if that's true, but that's obviously a concern that you could be just rounded up and sent off.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a possibility on the U.S. side. Another interesting thing about El Salvador is that they actually have created a lexicon of tattoos that's being used by intelligence agencies in different parts of the world to identify Barrio 18, MS-13, but operate here. And so on the El Salvadoran side, there's sort of I've heard people say, even when the Homeland Security guys said, one of the guys didn't want to get on the plane because he has tattoos, meaning an American operator. Oh. And I said, well, that's not true, that many people here have tattoos. The El Salvadoran police and intelligence services actually know the difference between a gang tattoo but I'm not sure the same processes in the U.S. And I'll tell you this, that the Tren de Agua are not tattooed like MS-13 and Barrio 18. I mean, maybe some are, but I think they learned that you can't tattoo your face and give it all away. So most of the guys coming off the plane had very few tattoos. When I say few, in comparison
Understood.
to...
Philip, could you describe this? You've been in this prison that is legendary around the world where these men were taken, again, called the Terrorism Confinement Center. Could you describe what the conditions inside that prison?
Yeah, there's a two sides to it, which, depending on who's listening to you, maybe they'll think I'm sympathetic one way or the other. But the facts are that I have never seen a prison so clean and orderly. But it is so because by design, it's almost total austerity. So the whole philosophy of the construction of the prison and its management is that the inmates have virtually no contact with anybody. So they're in, each block has, I forget the exact number of cells, but they have cells that hold 80 people. So around 2,000 people could be in a cell block. But within that cell of 80 people, there are no amenities. They leave the cell for 30 minutes a day, only to stand in front of the cell and do exercise and maybe have a religious service. And that's it. They're not allowed to speak. If they're speaking with each other, they have to talk in low tones. There's zero tolerance for disobedience, which begs the question, how is that obedience maintained? And it's, I think it's maintained through the threat of a consequence, which is definitely it's solitary confinement. They have that, but probably also, getting slapped. And this is just me telling you what I've, observed there. But it's, when you walk in, I've never seen anything like it. The guards, nobody is abused. There's never been a murder in Sakat. They have guards that look above, look in front, and there's video surveillance 24 hours and the lights never go off. They dim at night. So it's total austerity. They have no contact to the outside world. That's part of the accusations against Sakat, is that with no amenities, no ability to communicate with the outside world, all legal interactions are done via, video from a room inside that block. They never leave the block. There are no life sentences or capital punishment in El Salvador, but their workaround is to have multiple, 90-year sentences. And so these guys will never, the MS-13 and Barrio 18 guys will never leave this prison alive.
You've interviewed people in there. Am I not right about that? Have you?
Correct.
Why have they allowed you to do that?
It's the access. I mean, when I came and I interacted with the government early on, they knew my reputation for, deep, slow reporting, and my ask was, if it's really good, if it's not a police state, if you're not abusing people, then give me access, and they did. So I've moved freely in and out of homicide units, intelligence, military. It's in a way you might call it reckless on their part, because I don't do favors, and so I've been able to read the files, and that's where the nightmares came. I mean, I get a little emotional because the people of El Salvador are the kindest people I've ever met in the world. I know people say that about foreign countries, but I've never experienced anything like this country. And it makes no sense because of what this country has suffered. People should be bitter and seeking vengeance. And this country is so beautiful, and people have astounded me. But I've heard their stories, and my God, the horror stories. I mean, these gang members would walk into an elementary school and grab a girl and rape her in front of the school. And it was a horror movie, this country. And that's the context of the war on gangs and what has happened here. But the access has been, it doesn't make any sense to me, but that's why I've had the access.
Well, we're fortunate that you did, particularly on that tarmac and on those planes. The reporting and the photography was spectacular, and we thank you for sharing it with us and talking to us, Philip. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can see all the photos. Oh, what'd you say?
I miss Boston.
Oh.
Anytime.
Anytime. We'd love to talk to you in
Boothby
person.
Harbor is my stomping ground. Boothby Harbor.
Okay.
Come say hi.
And we can see all your photographs at time.com, right?
Yep.
Correct? Time
Yes,
Magazine.
yes.
Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you very much for your work. We much appreciate it. We have been speaking with journalist Philip Holsinger, who documented the arrival of hundreds of detainees from the United States to El Salvador. And again, check out the photos if you haven't already seen them at time.org. They are incredible.
And we should remind people the litigation against Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act is still pending before the courts.
Okay, from international mega prisons to police use of confidential informants. We're going to talk about the criminal justice system closer to home. The Boston Globe is out with this disturbing new investigative series, podcast, and everything. Snitch City. We'll speak with investigative reporter Andrew Ryan and editor Brendan McCarthy, about police abuse of informants. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, new numbers show that Massachusetts' shelter population is on the decline. Commuter ferries are now running on a permanent basis between East Boston and Lynn. And a closer look at what could be on the chopping block for youth mental health services in Governor Healy's proposed budget. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And GM Roth Design Remodeling, dreams delivered, with custom kitchens, bathrooms, and additions. Serving New England for over 39 years. Learn more at gmroth.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At the library tomorrow with John King on the day of those huge elections in Florida and in Wisconsin, and the former ambassador to Denmark, Rufus Gifford, who also was chief protocol for Joe Biden and was the finance chair for Kamala Harris. We got a lot to discuss with him tomorrow, too. You know, the Boston Globe Spotlight team, for their decades of incredible investigative work, their Pulitzer Prize-winning reporting on abuse in the Catholic Church, the Stewart healthcare disaster with Ralph De La Torre, and that statistic you obviously recall about the median net worth for a black family in Boston not too long ago, $8. Most recently, the team has been digging into the seedy, widespread, and morally questionable world of confidential police informants, setting their sights on the South Shore community of New Bedford as cops coerce local drug dealers to rat on their friends, their family, and as drug dealer Frank Simmons found, the occasional police chief.
He said they'd relocate me, give me money, because that was the concern. Was like, what are you worried about? I'm like, what am I worried about? I'm going to rat on a cop? Like, I got to live around here. Every single cop in the city is going to be after me.
What am I worried about? A great line. Joining us now in Studio 3 is Brendan McCarthy and Andrew Ryan. Brendan is the Globe Spotlight editor. Andrew is one of the investigators who's been deeply involved in the series. It's hosted by Globe reporter Dugan Arnett. The first 4 episodes of the podcast, Snitch City, are available now wherever you listen. Brendan, Andrew, it's great to have you here. Well done.
Thank you both for coming in, and great job. This was a really disturbing series. But Brendan, since you're the boss, let's start with you. How did this whole thing, how did this come about? How did you wind up down there in New Bedford? How did it start?
Sure. Well, it goes back many years. In fact, our colleague Dugan Arnett wrote a terrific 2023 Globe magazine story about one case in particular. That was a case of a young woman named Carly Medeiros who wrote an email to the Globe, landed in Dugan's inbox. The title of the email was, "I Need Help." And in it, she outlined her really fantastical tale about her relationship with a drug detective named Jared Lucas. And it seemed too outlandish to be true, but sure enough, Dugan dug in and found that it was not only indeed true, but fantastical, I think is the right word. So that culminates in a terrific 2023 Globe magazine piece about this love triangle, lies, all this tawdry stuff, and much more, and about a big drug case, huge drug case down there. In fact, they called it Operation High Stakes, right? Well, that drug case kind of went sideways because of Dugan's reporting. And then after that, we sat around and said, there's got to be more, right? More people came out of the woodwork, more tips, more ideas. And would you believe it? It's way more widespread than just that one case.
Yeah. Well, yeah, speaking of widespread, before we get into some of the individual stories, which are just stunning and horrifying, can you explain, Andrew, how critical, which I was embarrassed, I did not know, confidential informants are to drug policing in this state, not just in New Bedford?
Well, and that's right. It's not just New Bedford. It's across the Commonwealth and really across the country that informants are the lifeblood of narcotics work. We found in Massachusetts, by going through thousands of search warrants, that it's nearly 9 out of 10 drug raids hinge on a confidential informant. And what I didn't know before this process started is that those informants never go anywhere near court. They tend to be kind of the source for much of the information that gives officers probable cause to search somebody's home, search somebody's car, search somebody's phone.
And by the way, it's 90% statewide. Were you, and 99% from what I understand in New Bedford, those cases are dependent upon those informants.
And of course, everybody around here immediately comes to the Whitey Bulger case from years ago when John Conley was working for the FBI and Whitey Bulger was his informant, and that did not end well.
Massachusetts is really ground zero for some of these biggest cases. There's the Whitey case, but there's also this other case, which is in all the history books and all the texts. It's the Carlos Luna case in the late 80s. You may remember this. Boston police officer basically uses fabricated information for a CI, big drug bust, and then there's a shootout. His partner shot and killed, but it's all predicated on a lie because they were just trying to make a case, and they gilded the lily, cut corners, fabricated, and yeah.
And how did it end?
Badly. Carlos Luna's partner was shot dead. There was it was at the time, in fact, around the time of Charles Stewart, there's a lot of eyes on the Boston police back then. But, and if you talk to Dick Lair today, look at these big cases, Whitey, Carlos Luna, what hasn't changed? Nothing's really changed.
That's a great point, the informant system. And go ahead.
Well, and actually, in a lot of ways, there's less transparency now than there was during the Carlos Luna case. It's even harder to get your arms around how often a particular informant's being used. There's less disclosed now.
Why don't you spend like a half a second describing how the rules and regulations of each of these communities have about use of informants?
Well, there's, and we're talking about on the local level, it varies from place to place. I mean, we did a survey of all law enforcement agencies in Massachusetts. Some have no policies at all. We even found one of the state's 10 largest cities didn't have a policy. But it's entirely up to the word of police and kind of trust in police.
Okay, can we start? Let's talk about episode 1. I hope you're not going to be upset about giving some of this stuff away, because you got to listen to the richness of the story itself. We'll do the best we can here. Let's just set this up in episode 1. There's this guy, George Santos. And
not the congressman.
No, he is no longer, I believe, in any case, here's the sound from episode 1. As the stage is being set, a group of men in New Bedford call the cops to report that a man dressed in all black with bloodshot eyes and a gun has forced his way onto their boat, claiming to be a police officer. You're going to hear Dugan's voice, you're going to hear an officer's voice, and you're also going to hear this guy we'll talk about in a minute, another cop, Mark Raposa. Here it is.
As police try to figure out exactly what's going on, the message reaches an officer in a nearby patrol car.
A male identifying himself as a police officer is breaking into a boat.
Here's Mark Raposa.
I think at that point, I'm probably already putting 2 and 2 together.
Immediately, he has a bad feeling because he suspects he knows who might be causing the trouble. A colleague he's spent the past year trying to avoid. A young officer named George Santos.
Brendan, who's George Santos?
George Santos was a veteran New Bedford police officer who was very proactive when it came to looking for pills and drugs. But the catch here, Jim, is that he actually was an officer in the Marine unit. Mm-hmm. Supposed to look at things like boat licenses and all that. Look, New Bedford does have a pretty active port, but over several years, Santos just went wild. He was stopping people, according to the New Bedford Police Department's own investigation. And, every stop sort of landed like this. Pulls him over, said, "Where are your pills?" All off the books. A lot of frankly, undocumented workers. You can understand why they didn't come forward. And that just metastasized through the years, and no one really spoke up. No one did anything. In fact, that whole wild story, it's never been public until now, until this series.
Who's this Raposa guy who did have the courage to speak up, Andrew?
So he's a current officer in New Bedford, and he didn't like what he saw. And so he talked to us, and at the time, he raised alarms.
Well, you talked about how many people you and Dugan had to go through to find people that would talk to you on the record because they were obviously afraid. Tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, this is a dangerous world, obviously. These are hard cases, and they're drug cases, so there's violence kind of all around them. So, I mean, in court records, these people are kept anonymous for a reason. And so getting people to talk was really, really difficult, and Brendan and Dugan kind of led the charge on a lot of that stuff and did tremendous work in earning people's trust.
Forget people who are hard to talk to. People who should be responding to legitimate reporters when you were requesting basic information, including anonymous information that allowed the public to be informed. In many of these cases, they weren't complying with those requests either, were they? The departments, I mean.
No, I mean, Jim, how many CIs are there in insert your town? Most departments told us to get lost. They said, get out of here, right? I mean, really basic stuff. And when you think about it, the word of a CI when you get in court it's a hall pass. Just trust us. Actually, to steal Andrew's
That's how
word,
they get the warrants, right?
Yeah, it's all based on blind faith. Yeah. And when you think about America's drug war, right, and in so many of these cases, I challenge anyone, go into a court each day. You're going to find this is a large part of the docket, right? It's just based off this trust us idea.
Can I say one thing about the Santos thing? Because I know I confused some of the players here, but was Santos one of the ones who ultimately the FBI took a look at and this? Am I wrong about that? I know they did.
Well, not yet. I mean, maybe they will now because Lord knows we put a lot of material in the paper.
But nothing happened to Santos, right? He just left the department, right?
Left the department.
Well, speaking of left the department, apparently Paul Oliveira, who's the chief, is just retired from the department, and you have a lot of stories about Paul Oliveira, who became the chief from when he was just starting out.
Yes, yeah. One of the stories in one of the episodes in our series kind of chronicles his rise. He kind of rewrote the rules when he was a young narcotics officer, particularly with the use of informants. And so we documented that, and it really is kind of what he rode to become chief. And, we have talked to, quite frankly, several of his former informants. And, there's another episode coming out tomorrow that'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah. You have a scene that there's a big drug bust.
The biggest ever at this point in New Bedford.
But it turns out it becomes even bigger after other players leave the scene of the drug bust, and then they go back to a room where there's money being handed out. Tell us about that.
So this was...
Are we putting you in a position where you don't want to talk about some of the stuff? And I'm serious.
It's already in the podcast. I heard the podcast over the weekend.
So tell us what you want to tell us, and feel free to stop at a point.
You can't give me a spoiler alert when the podcast is out there.
And look, especially tomorrow's episode is a doozy, and you will hear from one of Oliveira's former informants in the most blunt terms possible. But nonetheless, right, you're talking about this raid on Jones Street, and I want to be clear, there's a lot of details that we did not put in the paper or in the podcast, but the ones that we did, I think, provide a pretty damning portrait of what took place here. And in this case, in Jones Street, right, what was allegedly the largest bust of this kind, there was only a small portion of the drugs that were allegedly initially nabbed. And then one of the key players, Oliveira's colleague, a gentleman, Bobby Richard, who you hear from in the podcast, basically walks us through it and says it was, I can't use his terms here, Jim, but he'll say it's a lot of malarkey, right? And
the bust became 8 times bigger the next morning. Yeah.
For the big media rollout.
Yeah. Bingo. We're reporters. You've been there, Marjorie.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. They got the dope on the table and hoorah, hoorah. But in this case, Richard, the former Oliveira colleague, says not only that, but the police chief, the Oliveira, who would be the police chief, also let the informant keep a kilo. That is one of the claims that I think is a big one in this series, and the mayor nor the police chief has responded in any
I want to talk about that in
Yeah.
a minute, which drives me out of my mind. But can we?
The idea that was a way to keep your informants happy, that you maybe take half the drugs and they get a quarter of the drug, or some breakup like that. So everybody's making money.
Yeah, the series outlines this playbook, and that's where Oliveira's alleged rise came, and it was called the license to deal. And these setup cases, right, is you keep the low-level guys happy and you protect certain folks.
And
can we stay with this?
Can we finish that one scene though? Is this the one where it ends up where they're in the room and one of the informants is there and there's somehow a phone behind him and he manages to make a call because
that's another whole bust.
That's a different bust. Okay, but that's a great scene. Tell us that scene.
I love when Andrew and Brendan look at each other saying, should we really tell her this? Should we tell her?
It's in the podcast. I spent my whole weekend listening to this.
We may need to make 20 episodes. This is another scene, and that is from the gentleman you heard at the top of the show here, Frank Rizzo Simmons, who, by the way, what a great talker.
Yeah,
right?
great accent.
By the way, almost all these people, Raposa, all these cops. What's the guy's name you mentioned a minute ago? Richard?
Rizzo. Yes, well, Bobby Richard as well. And again,
New Bedford.
The work of this team, if I may for 1 second, you have a actually the FBI agent talking on the record. Yeah. You've got the drug dealer. You've got the informants. I mean, this is great.
You guys did great reporting.
But in that case, this gentleman, Frank Rizzo Simmons, gets picked up. He acknowledges to us in the most, blank terms possible, I was dealing drugs. And he told us about where they were,
high
how
life.
they were. Exactly.
Lost it all.
Yes. And then, he got picked up by Oliveira. And he details when he's in the police station and the kind of the squeeze that they're trying to make. And at one point, in kind of comical terms, they order pizza because he alleges that Oliveira and others stole money from him. And he said, "You want some cheese?" Again, I'm not doing justice. You'll have to listen. But
great accent.
Can I ask
hold on, we're going to finish with the phone. So what happens?
Oh, he picks up. Well, of course, Mr. Rizzo here happens to run a cell phone pager shop, right? Because as one does when you're
a drug dealer.
Yes, and he tells them to shut the phones down. And again, I'm paraphrasing here, but the phones go quiet, and then the real kind of turn of events, right, is eventually because Frank here, the drug dealer, has his own set of moral scruples and principles when he's presented with the opportunity to snitch. He doesn't. That's right.
By the way, the series podcast written thing, Snitch City, what it's called, 4 episodes out so far, right? 5 tomorrow, and it's fabulous. I was going to say the philosophical question, but it sounds too effete, but it is and we just talked to a guy from El Salvador who's a photographer who says the people love the president even though he violates everybody's civil rights because he got rid of the gangs. And he doesn't deny that he's getting rid of their civil rights. We live in a country where a president who still has plurality support doesn't give a damn about the rule of law. So what's the answer to the question? If they reduce the use and distribution of drugs in New Bedford, just taking this one example, the fact that they are arguably violating the law to get there, or making these payoffs, like to this guy, you can take 1 kilo, we'll put the other 3 on the table. Do people there, other than the people involved, argue that the ends justify the means, like that guy did in El Salvador, Andrew?
I mean, I guess if we're a country of laws, then everybody has to follow the law.
But that's an academic. I understand
true,
that. I'm talking about on the ground, like the Salvadorians, like Philip Holsinger was describing a minute ago, who are thrilled. They know the law's being violated, but the gangs are gotten rid of. Do the people on the ground in New Bedford, are they thankful for this despite how they got there?
I mean, I think it depends on who you talk to.
Okay.
At the end of the day, there's still drugs in New Bedford. There's still drugs all over the Commonwealth. So I think what we found was that basically this is a system where it all comes down to the word of police. And even prosecutors often don't know who the police's informants are, and those informants are never going anywhere near a courthouse. So everything's happening in the shadows.
And it's not just, by the way, what you say. There's this guy, Daniel, who essentially became an informant, and they use him, and they use him, and they use him, continue to use him because they got him. And then another cop apparently outs him to another leader in his gang. So you can't even trust the cops who are using you to not out you and put you at great risk. And that phone call that is recreated to Dugan from this guy Daniel.
Do we play the clip of Daniel yet?
Well, we have it here, but time's running, so I figure, we can do it. Here's some of the story of Daniel, not his real name, a New Bedford man on the hook for drug charges and offered an out by local cops by becoming an informant. Here he is.
Daniel just wants to go home, and the police are giving him a simple way to do that.
They just wanted one gun, and then they was like, you'll be done. Basically, just this one time type shit, you know what I'm saying?
So he makes a decision. He'll do it. Just this once.
And I was just like, all right, whatever,
The officers put some paperwork in front of him, registering him as a confidential informant.
Well, I signed it, and then when I signed, they were like, you have a week.
1 week to give cops enough information to get one gun off the street. Then Daniel's off the hook. But that's not what happens.
As I was saying, there's another one and another one and another one, and then finally another cop allegedly rats him out to a leader, a friend of the cops from when they were in school, and puts this guy's life at great risk by another cop in the same department. Can we get to something that puts me over the edge here? My attitude, I was surely not speaking for you, is when a public official declines to speak to a credible reporter, the rebuttable presumption is guilty as charged. We had a day with Mayor Mitchell a few years ago.
John Mitchell.
And I have to say, we were really impressed. Mitchell didn't speak to you. Oliveira did not speak to you. What do you draw from this, Andrew? I know you're not going to take the irresponsible position I just did, but what do you draw from this?
Well, one thing I want to note is we've been asking Oliveira for an interview to talk about confidential informants in New Bedford for nearly 3 years.
Yeah.
It's like 950 some days. I mean, when the mayor wouldn't get on the phone with us, we went to City Hall unannounced and went in his office and said we'd like to speak to him. And he was there, but he wouldn't come out and see us. I think when you look at the mayor's statements and the things they put out, they're trying to kind of push back on the edges of some things, but also not sit down to talk about this issue.
Well, one of the things that occurred to me, there's a lot devoted in this podcast to Paul Oliveira, his antics before he became the chief. A lot of police officers knew about his alleged antics, and then he becomes the chief.
Yeah, his former colleagues, and you hear from him in the podcast.
Yeah.
And, there's a moment, too, in the terrific print package, online package as well from Dugan, right, where just a couple of years ago, the kind of coronation, the mayor Mayor Mitchell taps Oliveira to be the chief. And it's in that moment when all of a sudden these, the drug dealers, the folks around town start texting each other saying, can you believe this? Well, did they know about the FBI? What about, right? Like, yeah, it was, for all intents and purposes, kind of a well-known secret.
Did the mayor know?
But I can't answer that because I don't have an answer for that. But, who was asking questions and who trusts a guy like Frank Rizzo Simmons? I mean, again, what we did is we allowed people to put their name, their voice to things, and the mayor and the police chief and the city has said, well, you can't trust these dubious characters. Well, but the whole system is predicated on exactly that in court. And at least we put names to it, right? You hear from them. And the court records and docs.
Can we say what we said at the beginning, which is really important about this series when you delve into it? While the focus is New Bedford, this is this practice of use of confidential informants and the huge dependence upon them is virtually everywhere in Massachusetts, as you guys document. Andrew or Brendan, whoever wants to answer this, it seems to me that when the rules are either non-existent or uneven from community to community in terms of how cops locally deal with informants, it might be an opportunity for our legislature to get involved and have statewide policy. We're not huge fans of the legislature on this show, but is anybody calling for them to get involved so that there are uniform standards?
That's a great question. There are some other states that have adopted some safeguards, Florida and California most notably. And it's not that there's a statewide policy, it just offers some basic protections, things like that you can't use underage kids as informants.
We don't have that.
No.
We don't have anything statewide.
We have nothing.
And do we know why we don't have anything statewide? I know they have a 5-month vacation every 2 years, but other than that, do we have any idea why we don't have anything?
I mean, this is a shadowy, dirty business. And I think that there can be a little bit of we don't want to know. We don't want to know how this gets done.
Well, if you do want to know, check out Snitch City. It's really great.
Yes, you
It's
should also
really-
listen to the podcast because it reminds me of listening to all the mob guys with Buddy Cianci's office in Providence in that crime town. The first,
That was great,
The
too,
first
yeah.
one about Providence. But listen to these guys talk themselves. I love the
accents.
Yeah.
They're pretty well because you're a full river girl.
Well, I
That's
had,
why.
I had one for a long time myself.
There it is.
Trying to overcome it still.
Congratulations to all of you guys, Dugan, everyone.
It's a great
really
series. It's
terrific.
a great podcast. Thank you so much for
Good to see
joining
you
us.
both.
Okay, I'm on the wrong page. Let me turn
You
the
are.
page. We've been speaking with Brendan McCarthy and Andrew Ryan. Brendan is the Globe Spotlight editor. Andrew's one of the investigators who's been deeply involved in this podcast series, Snitch City. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, and it's really great. Snitch City, hosted by Globe reporter Dugan Arnett. Okay. Oh, the first 4 episodes. That's right. The first 4 episodes are already available. So you were criticizing me for
You're all over
Jim
this.
that was already
I wasn't
out there.
criticizing. Well, I was
Coming after our
criticizing
quick
you.
break, it's time for 2 more things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
For a long time, gambling brought money and power to crime organizations, until the government wanted in on the action. But who would get to control that great power?
Bob Crane's domain stretches as far as the eye can see.
He's responsible for 18% of the state budget.
Bob was not a banker. Bob was a showman. Bob was an entertainer.
On this week's Scratch and Win, the first lottery czar. Tomorrow night at 9 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Advocates, the human services provider helping individuals facing mental health, substance use, and other life challenges, is now hiring clinicians. Learn more about their supportive culture and open positions at advocates.org. And the Massachusetts Health Connector for Business. New premium value plans can help small business owners find and offer accessible employee health benefits. Learn more at mahealthconnector.org/business.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. We're streaming youtube.com/GBH News. 2 more things. Marjorie has 1.
Yeah, I have been, as many people were, quite upset by the attack or the arrest or kidnapping or disappearance, whatever you want to call it, of that Tufts student last week. You may have seen it on television when people came toward her in black outfits. Some of them were masks. Some of them did not have identifying police or ICE badges on them, so she didn't know who they were, and shoved her into a car, and she's now in Louisiana. Now we have the New York Times talks about this 21-year-old Columbia University student who's lived in the United States since she was 7 years old, brought here by her parents. By all, you read about her, an upstanding person. She was high school valedictorian. As I said, she came here when she was 7. She participated in a pro-Palestinian demonstration back at Columbia University. She also was posted these flyers that pictured members of the Board of Trustees at Columbia with the phrase "wanted for complicity in genocide." They were trying to get Columbia University back then to disinvest from Israel, and it was similar to what people did back in the days of apartheid in South Africa, when people wanted companies and universities to disinvest in South Africa at the time of apartheid. These students wanted their school to disinvest because of what was going on in Gaza. So it was pro-Palestinian. What the Trump administration keeps doing is claiming that pro-Palestinian is pro-Hamas. To my mind, they're 2 completely different things. Hamas is this vicious, horrible terrorist group. We heard stories most recently over the weekend about the horrible things that they've done to those prisoners, the Israeli prisoners they stole from their homes, starvation, just torture in these tunnels. I mean, these people are horrible terrorists, but that is different from the people that this young woman was trying to protest about, the Palestinians there. But you know what seems to be going on here? It's like they want to self-deport these people. They're hoping that what they'll basically do by all these quick. I don't even know if
Some
they're
have,
legal.
by the way.
Yeah, well, no kidding.
Out of fear that they're next.
They'll self-deport. Well, this woman, anyway, she's in hiding now because she knows ICE is after her. She has been here since she was 7. a wonderful student by all records, and she's hiding from ICE because they want to put her in one of these horrible places in Louisiana, like they put these other people with very little evidence at all of their being pro-Hamas. And by the way, when you read the Tufts University students' op-ed, what is she? Is she pro-Hamas in that op-ed?
She's pro-Palestinian rights.
No, she is pro-Palestinian. They are conflating this, and it is outrageous.
Okay, here's my two more things. I would like each of you to directly communicate with the head of HR at GBH and complain about Marjorie has yet again taken too much time, so I can't do my two more things. Who's the head of HR here?
Okay, if
Who's
you
the head
go
of HR?
first, you go first.
Who's the
and
head
you
of
can
HR?
do it. I don't know.
Okay, write our boss then. Write somebody and complain about Marjorie
Okay,
taking...
we don't give a crap about your opinion.
Well, that's what Marjorie's attitude obviously is. So if you're okay with that, you're okay with that.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, mine was so good that I'm going to save it for tomorrow.
Okay, all right. Coming
Thank
up.
you.
Coming up after
You know what mine
lunch-
was about?
What?
Cracks in MAGA. People would have loved that.
Cracks and MAGA. I'm
Cracks
sorry,
in-
Jim.
It's okay.
I'm sorry. I got carried away.
You did.
Coming up
It was
after the
good,
1
though,
o'clock
and important,
news,
actually.
Michael Curry reacts to a
A while since you made a gift of support to GBH. Now is the time to step forward and renew your support for your home for trusted local news and conversations that matter to you. Renew your membership now at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Safety Insurance, offering auto insurance policies designed to help for when the worst happens. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms. And Explo. Explo's Boston area summer program lets middle schoolers be doctors, chefs, vets, and more. Day and overnight options at explo.org/summer. Preferred deadline April 1st.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters?
Tracks the speed and efficiency of various fast food drive-thrus across the country. We'll open phone and text lines to hear what you have to say about the luxury of buying cheap, processed, and probably pretty bad for you food without having to get out of the car. And we'll reminisce about that one time Jim got stuck at the McDonald's ball pit. All that ahead in the third hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump is declining to confirm that he won't
can become president of the United States. For example, a twice-elected president could become vice president and then return as the next president if the current president were to be removed from office, resign, or die. And a former two-term president serving as Speaker of the House of Representatives could become president through the Presidential Succession Act of 1947. These scenarios, however, would challenge the common understanding of the 22nd Amendment's presidential term limits and would likely be met with lawsuits. Hanzila Wang, NPR News, Washington.
Both Wisconsin Supreme Court candidates are out campaigning today ahead of an election tomorrow that will determine if the court's majority flips from liberal to conservative. Chuck Kernbach of member station WUWM in Milwaukee reports.
Circuit Court Judge Brad Schimmel has been endorsed by President Trump, and groups backed by business executive Elon Musk have poured in $20 million of support. The Republicans say the state Supreme Court contest could affect House redistricting in Wisconsin for 2026 and the Trump agenda. Schimmel says he and his supporters are energized.
I've never seen voters this revved up about a court race before.
Schimmel's opponent, Circuit Court Judge Susan Crawford, has backing from some prominent Democrats. She's promising to fight to the finish.
Fight for every vote we can get in Wisconsin, and I believe we can win this election on Tuesday.
Crawford says she's not made any promises on House redistricting. For NPR News, I'm Chuck Quirnbach in Milwaukee.
Elon Musk's SpaceX is set to launch a privately funded human spaceflight mission from Florida's Kennedy Space Center tonight. Central Florida Public Media's Brendan Byrne has more on the Fram 2 mission.
The mission will take the crew of 4 international participants to a polar orbit.
a first for human spaceflight. After launching, the Crew Dragon capsule will head due south, putting them on an orbital path that will carry them over the poles of the planet. The crew will conduct 22 experiments from that orbit and will take the first X-ray from space. The mission is bankrolled by cryptocurrency entrepreneur Chun Wang, who was born in China but is a naturalized citizen of Malta. He'll serve as the mission's commander. A Norwegian film director, German robotics researcher, and Australian adventurer are Fram 2 mission. For NPR News, I'm Brendan Byrne in Orlando.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. What had been 2 temporary commuter ferry routes crossing Boston Harbor are now permanent. The routes connecting downtown Boston with both East Boston and Lynn went into full-time service today. The ferries had previously been running as pilot programs to help offset road congestion caused by repairs to the Sumner Tunnel and the Blue Line. Paula Villatoro lives in East Boston and works downtown. She says these permanent routes are a no-brainer.
Perfect, like no traffic, don't have to wait for the train. Sometimes the train stops, has delays, I think the ferry provides a little bit more easier transportation on that.
The East Boston Ferry running 7 days a week at a cost of $2.40 per ride. The Lynn Ferry is operating Monday through Friday for $7 a ride. Weekend service is not to come online until May, they say. The number of families in emergency shelters has dropped dramatically after peaking at more than 7,600 households in July of last year. According to the Herald, it's a level that had the system on the verge of overloading, and it drained hundreds of millions of dollars in cash that the state had set aside. The new number of homeless is now 2,280. That's a 30% drop from the 7,600. Officials say the reduced number of families in shelters is a result of new policies put in place over the past year by Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey and members of the Democratic side of the legislature. But Republicans also point to the Trump administration's beefed-up security at the southern border. 64 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, home of the Name Your Price tool, so drivers can see coverage options at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Houston Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with former ambassador to Denmark, Rufus Gifford. We're going to talk to him all about the Vance's trip to Greenland, CNN's John King on the day of some big elections, one in Wisconsin and one in Florida. And we're going to be joined not tomorrow, but on April 8th for another edition of Ask the Mayor with Michelle Wu at the Boston Public Library. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. We're joined now on Zoom by Michael Curry. Michael is the CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, on the board of the National NAACP. Michael, it's good to see you.
Good to see you both.
So let's start with some news over the weekend. People have kind of talked about this before, but the president himself has said, it could be term number 3 for me. There may be ways to get around it. What do you think?
Well, I mean, one is there absolutely, based on our Constitution, should not be a term number 3. But I do hear folks who stop me on the street and they're afraid of that we're so much tripping the wires of our Constitution, the boundaries of our Constitution under this administration, that there'll be some effort to find a way to extend beyond 2 terms. One person even said to me that they have a fear that they'll create some reason for martial law.
Yeah.
And then prompt him calling for a suspension of the election. I am, nothing is beyond possibilities anymore. I think if we go back a few years ago, we wouldn't have imagined we'd be where we are today. So I have a tremendous concern, but this is where you elect people and they have a responsibility to hold the line. And make sure that we are not tripping the boundaries of our Constitution.
Well, I have 2 reactions to this. One is I hated the fact that it was treated like a typical news story. Oh, like Donald Trump is thinking of violating the Constitution and running and serving for a 3rd term. That was just, but then the flip side is I say to myself, Michael, well, maybe we should say, okay, you can run for a third term, and Barack Obama's going to run against you. What do you think about that? I mean, so maybe there's a way to buy into his. It is absolutely incredible, and the fact that people are not up in arms, I guess we say this every day, is really depressing. Speaking of not playing by the rules, though, this story by the Globe Spotlight team, a follow-up on Ralph De La Torre, who destroyed the lives of thousands of workers and patients, not to mention took the lives, I think, by his callous behavior, is just unbelievable. The Globe goes to this horse show where his wife is riding dressage. And
dancing horses.
He's sitting there smoking a cigar. And I love when they go up to her and they say, "Are you Nicole?" She says, "No." And then obviously she is. But they tell in the story in the middle of this thing that he makes a $100,000 donation to some charity to get prime seats for him
AIDS
and his
thing.
wife at an AIDS
In
thing.
Dallas.
And where does the money coming from? Obviously, it's not from the De La Torre Foundation, unlike they say up front, but it's coming from Stewart Healthcare, which is going bankrupt at the same time that a hospital just up the road is closing. My takeaway on this is the fact that neither state prosecutors nor the federal government has gotten it together to bring criminal proceedings against De La Torre and his top lieutenants. I think the only place that's indicted him is Malta. I mean, what was your reaction when you read this story?
Yeah, I mean, one is, of course, it's the ongoing disappointment that we allowed power and greed to hurt our healthcare system. So this is the ripple effects of that, right? I co-chair the Carney Hospital Task Force, so I know the impact that losing a hospital has on a community. I intimately know that. I also know from the fact that we are in Neshoba Valley with Community Health Center presence, what that means when you lose a hospital in Neshoba Valley, or with the fragility of the hospitals that were sold, that we still have to wait and see on what happens with those hospitals, and whether, like the hospital in Florida, that is the subject of this Globe story, that if there's been so much long-term disinvestment, mishandling of the hospital's infrastructure, that even the acquiring hospital or entity could end up closing years later because they're still dealing with a deficit. So I have all those concerns with regard to this. So back to Ralph De La Torre, greed, right? This is about abuse of power. And the reality is we have to hold folks accountable. In this particular case, I don't know what the slow pace of justice is, other than maybe one of the other changes from the Trump administration is this is not the kind of investigation that would be likely under a Trump administration. They're not going to go after greed and power and wealthy folks who've abused their authority. This is probably not where their focus is. So it's going to take local investigatory agencies to really pursue him.
Just a couple of details I wanted to point out that Mrs. De La Torre, I guess Nicole Acosta is her name. I guess she used to work for Stewart. But they've been down in Florida all winter long because she's been riding there since January, regularly winning aboard her 3 horses. One of those horses, Dante, broke records in 2014, selling for $3.1 million at auction before Acosta became the owner. So these are very pricey horses. And I also wondered if the hospital you referred to, Michael, is the one that was infested with thousands of bats.
Yes.
And the sewage system overflowed.
That's a great detail. That's a great point.
Imagine you're in the hospital coming out of surgery and you got bats circling over your head. Oh, my God.
It is absolutely a hospital. And of course, they're looking at, 30,000 people, patients that won't have access to care as a result of this disruption and this likely closure. And then, of course, the many staff who rely on that institution for their jobs, their livelihood, for their families. This is real life consequences for people when you let power go unchecked.
One last thing. The Globe did a wonderful follow-up also to their original series, in their original series, making clear this isn't just dislocation, where, as you say, tens of thousands of people lose a hospital, and where are they going to go next, as you're trying to deal with in terms of the Dorchester situation. They documented that a bunch of people died specifically because of the disinvestment. There was that horrible story in the Globe about that
over here at St. Elizabeth
that instrument or whatever it was that would have saved that woman's
her
life.
Her liver was bleeding. She
Whatever
was a 39-year-old woman that had given birth at the hospital.
And she died at the same time that he's making huge contributions, flying around on the company jet, and then the great stories that Brian McGrory did about the jets and the yachts it's just incredible.
The instruments that would have saved her life had been repossessed because they hadn't paid the vendor, so they had to whisk her to a different hospital, but it was too late, and the 39-year-old mother died. Can
I say one last thing about this? Is not only should he be gone after because the evidence is overwhelming to me that he is a criminal, when you don't go after somebody who's that clear a criminal, you basically give a permission slip to other Ralph de la Torres to do what they do. But when you stop them, to me, an orange jumpsuit is the ultimate preventive measure from this kind of greed. We're talking to Michael Curry.
Michael, I wanted to just ask you before we move off the political, well, I guess that's not really a political story, but about this piece in Politico, ridiculing basically the event, the Democratic National Committee event that where all the Democratic operatives got together someplace or other. And the person that wrote this story for Politico was talking about how the Dems need to get their act together, and if they don't, they're going to be in a permanent minority. There was a quote from David Axelrod. He was a big Obama guy, who said the party has to assess how the self-styled party of the working class became seen as a party of elites and institutions at a time so many Americans are enraged at elites and institutions and saying, why isn't the party offering something other than being an alternative to Donald Trump? It was focusing on the same things. We wrapped up in so-called identity politics. We're just making fun of great swaths of the country that supported Donald Trump and all that. So how big of a problem do you think this is? Or is this just complaining between terms or what?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a mislead. The reality is there's a few factors that, as I see it, as a Democrat, that I see as the challenge here. So one is that Democrats are fractured and they're running in different directions, and I think that that's not good for the party. That being said, I think there's a few things. So one is, I think if you are a person in this country, if you are a listener to this program, and your working class program, I could run down the policy priorities for the Democratic Party that speak to you, that fight for you, that ensure that you have more money in your pocket, that you have access to services, and whether that's Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, working programs, loan repayment. I can go down a long list. And then you can look at the other party and find that that's not true, that that's not the case. However, to that point, the Democratic Party is crappy at messaging. They are the worst at friggin' messaging. And they don't tell their story well. And therefore, they lost the narrative, right? So when you lose the narrative, people can tell you that you're a pink elephant. And people will think you're a pink elephant, and you might start to think you're a pink elephant too. And I think that's where the Democratic Party is right now, that they're just not good at telling their story. And they lost the narrative with working class people. If you're rural, and you believe in rural hospitals, and you're white, if you are a poor working class white American. But then again, and I'm going to juxtapose that against another problem that the party has. As an African American, I always say, when you fight to do the wrong thing, you pay the consequence. That we know as civil rights activists, that if you fight for civil rights, you might not get that job, that promotion, that salary increase. You might not even get invited to the meeting. And I think the Democratic Party has been fighting for the right things for a long time, and now they're getting the backlash. So if you're fighting for racial justice and DEI and inclusion, you're now feeling the brunt of that by Americans who are Democrat, who are independent, who are not comfortable with inclusion. If you're fighting for LGBTQIA access or disability, people with disabilities, you're now getting the backlash of much of America that's not comfortable with that progress. So unfortunately, Democratic Party, you should have been prepared that if you fight for what's right, like many of us who do civil rights work, there is a backlash to progress. It is historical. It has always been our history. And I don't think they were prepared for it, Marjorie. I think they're shocked that so many people in the middle and some even Democrats who would be fighting for bargaining rights, right? Their union bucket, what do they call it? Lunch
bucket Democrats.
Lunch bucket Democrats are now losing their bargaining rights, but voted for Trump. Like, that's a contradiction. But yet it is where we are because we lost messaging. And you got to speak to that audience and tell them that they have to weigh up their interests and vote the totality of their interests and not just eggs and butter, even though that was a misrepresentation as well. Trump is not getting you lower eggs and butter. That's not happening.
Talking to Michael Curry, well, Massachusetts may not be getting you mental health caseworkers either. There's a story in the Globe about how Governor Healey's budget proposal calls for a slashing of roughly half of the state workers, 170 of them, who provide navigation services for people dealing with mental illness. And I think everybody listening to the show knows how complex and difficult to navigate the mental health system is, probably everywhere in America, but Massachusetts as well. The Globe editorial about this says it may provide an opportunity for the state to make the system more efficient and more easily navigable, if that's the proper word. But if that was in the offing, it would have happened already. So it seems to me this is a disaster in waiting for people who have mental health issues in their families.
Well, one is I always remind people that we have a budget process that begins with the governor presenting some ideas around what she thinks we should do for in this case, the FY26 budget. Then the House and the Senate weigh in and they take up much of what, or some of what, if not all of what the governor has proposed. And then they go back and forth. And then when the House and Senate present their budget, then it goes to what they call a conference committee to work out the details. And hopefully they get it done before the clock runs out. So I say that, Jim, just to say this is just the beginning of the process, and that this proposal is around how do we deal with a potential $12.4 million in savings, which the governor sees as an opportunity with some of these changes. I think the overall concern for many of us who know the importance of mental health, which is we have a mental health crisis in this country and in Massachusetts that has worsened since COVID. And the numbers tell us that. My mental health advocates and experts tell me that. It is a maze to get services. It is costly to try to get care. And quite frankly, whether it's chronic unemployment, suicide, drive-by shootings, and whatever else you can name, if we don't get people care, it manifests in our society in different ways that can hurt all of us. I say it all the time, pay now or pay greater later. Let's get these folks who need services the care they need. And this proposal, I think, tries to get at some things that I know the governor, as I've sat with her, understands the importance of mental health. But what we'll have to do is unpack her proposal, and the House and the Senate are doing that right now. Where it ends up, I hope, is a better system that's easier to navigate. But we know case managers matter, patient navigators matter, because if people can't figure out the maze of healthcare, they'll just walk away and suffer in silence.
One last thing about this, though. We've talked about Governor Healey about this quite a bit. She campaigned on roughly the same tax cut that Charlie Baker had attempted to get through the legislature unsuccessfully. She did. It was one of her first acts was to sign that. In light of what is clearly coming in terms of shortage of funds from the feds on a whole bunch of levels and the impact of that, including in a small ticket way, this elimination of half of these caseworkers, at least proposed in their budget, was that tax cut a mistake? Because those dollars could be funding a lot of the things that are being proposed to disappear.
Yeah, and I think of course, history will reflect back on whether it's a mistake or not. I think ultimately you give tax cuts for a reason, right? You want to provide relief, or you want to stimulate economies, right? You do those things with the levers you pull because you're trying to do the right thing. Who would have foreshadowed, one, the change in administrations and the fact that we are on the brink of potentially a recession based on these tariffs and all these other bad federal policies that are being put in place. Ultimately, the state will have to figure out where that money will come from. And taxes, unfortunately, are the way that we typically create the resources we need to pay for the things that we care about. So I don't know the answer, Jim, other than the fact that when this was proposed and implemented, I don't think people knew that we would be where we are today.
Talking to Michael Carey.
You know, Michael, we talked a lot about with Trump's animus toward DEI, companies, universities, all rebranding, taking down their pages, trying to kind of hide what they're doing. And this story that we read this morning from CNBC talks about, well, they're not giving up. They're just kind of being more sneaky about it, essentially, was what the story was saying. What do you think?
Can I comment on this first?
Yeah.
This is total BS. I mean, we read last week, University of Michigan has run around for years, one of the premier public universities in America, bragging about how they have this model of diversity, equity, inclusion.
They had that big piece that made fun of them. They were going overboard.
And they just eliminated it. Is that rebranding? Is that adapting?
Well, I was asking Michael.
I'm sorry.
But if you'd like to add anything before we get to Michael.
Well, I would have said the actual word, not BS, and I hope you have a 3-second delay, because I actually agree with Jim. It's all, smoke and mirrors. The reality is, and I've said this, I was a guest speaker this weekend at Boston College's Black Law Student Association. I said this: the goal is not the words. The goal is not what you have on your website or what you have in your collateral. It's your programs, right? This is an effort to kill DEI. He wants to eliminate those positions, eliminate those programs that elevate and advance qualified, capable, talented Black and brown folks into positions, people with disabilities, women. This is what the attack is about. So you can hide the words. And quite frankly, I think the people that are trying to hide the words and repackage the Tylenol, as my colleague Jim Hunt used to say, it's futile, because the reality is one day soon, you're going to get the question, are you eliminating any effort to create diversity? And you're going to have to say no or yes. And that is where courage will show up, because this is where we stand the ground. I want to say this last thing. The battle of words is the other thing I talked about this weekend. We have to be careful about words. We're losing the war on words. That's like me letting someone co-opt the word love and make it negative. And then I give up and say, okay, we won't call it love anymore. The reality is there's nothing wrong with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And to then think that you need to shift words because somebody's determined that those words are bad, shame on you, not shame on the person that tried to get you to shift from those words. Google, name the rest of those companies. I just think it's disturbing. I understand if you want to protect funding and relationships, but fight. fight for what you know is right. Otherwise, as I often say, courage will skip this generation.
Michael, one quick thing before you go. You mentioned, speaking of this Black Association of Law Students up at Boston College, I know these hotshot law schools, and Boston College is a pretty good law school. These recruiters all come there to, hire people for their summer internships or whatever. And a lot of these kids may have started law school before the Trump administration, before they realized that they were going to be viewed as a liability in Trump world. What is their feeling? What are they talking about? Are they must. I feel bad for these students. It's costing them, $70,000, $80,000 to go to law school here, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're concerned. I don't think they've never seen a moment like this, and neither would we. I started my remarks, which you made me pull it out as I was talking to both of you. I started my remarks with a quote from Charles Hamilton Houston, who was the architect of the attack on Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896 that led to the Brown v. Board education decision. He said, "A lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society."
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. So the role of lawyers is to fight back and to protect and preserve what we know is right, including our democracy and in the Constitution. And he basically did a series of cases that he championed leading up to what eventually would become the Brown v. Board of Education decision in 1954. He also said this, and I'll leave it at that. He said, lawsuits mean little unless supported by public opinion. Nobody needs to explain to a Negro the difference between the law in the books and the law in action. The really baffling problem is how to create a proper kind of public opinion. What he was talking about there is he fought for a guy named Donald Murray, a Black graduate of Amherst College, who wanted to attend the University of Maryland Law School, but was being denied because of the color of his skin. And he won a local court case, a district court case. And then he won later in 1935 in the Court of Appeals. What he was saying in that quote is, we can win, but the real win is in the Supreme Court. We make that law across the land. And then two, the people of University of Maryland were saying, hey, the school's academic rigor and quality will go down because we're letting in Black people, right? So you got to win the public opinion, because the naivete, the ignorance, the racism writ large thinks that if you have a Black or brown person in the room, quality goes down. That's what Charles Hamilton Houston was talking to. So my message to those lawyers is, we need you in the classroom. We need you in the boardroom. We need you in the law schools. We need you in the Supreme Court, because your lived experience and your compass will lead us to do the right thing, and you'll lead your organizations to do the right thing.
I'm there. By the way, that alarm on my phone didn't mean you had to stop speaking. I want to be totally clear. That's a great thing there. Michael, sorry missed the speech, but glad you're here today. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you. Anytime.
Thanks,
Be well.
Michael.
Michael Curry.
We've been speaking with Michael Curry, CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, on the board of the National NAACP. We always appreciate Michael joining us. He's also co-chair of the city-led investigation into the impacts of the closure of Dorchester's Kearney Hospital. Up next, we're going to open the lines to talk to you about a pressing issue in America today: fast food drive-thrus. The lines are long and the squawk box is enraging. Why do we love the drive-thru so much? Do you miss the days when they had the playlands at all the McDonald's? We're going to talk to you about those halcyon days and tell you the great story about Jim getting stuck in the tunnel at the playland on Route 1.
It's not funny.
Anyway, drive-thrus and you is up next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, new numbers show that Massachusetts' shelter population is on the decline. Commuter ferries are now running on a permanent basis between East Boston and Lynn. And a closer look at what could be on the chopping block for youth mental health services in Governor Healy's proposed budget. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And McLean Middleton. For over 100 years, McLean Middleton has been dedicated to serving its clients and its community, offering guidance through the complexities of today's legal system, with locations in Woburn and Boston. McLean.com. And the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Now on view, Van Gogh, the Rouland Family Portraits, featuring Van Gogh's portraits of the Rouland family and the deep bonds of friendship behind them. More at mfa.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, Wednesday and Friday, and on April 8th, whatever day that is, the mayor will join us for an hour of Ask the Mayor at the library. 5 years ago, McDonald's play spaces across the country closed their doors to the hungry, huddled masses. The COVID-19 pandemic upended how we do a lot of things, fast food included. Drive-through traffic soared. Nearly 83% of all fast food purchases came through the squawk box during the pandemic. But there's great disparity in the fast food drive-through world, especially when it comes to idling time. Taco Bell, do you know this, Marjorie, for instance, gets its customers through the line in just 4 minutes. That would include Donald Trump, of course, while Chick-fil-A customers wait nearly 8 to get their secret sauce, according to some data analysis from the Washington Post. So the lines are open at 877-301-8970. We want to hear from you, from your drive-through horror stories or delights. Are you a drive-through aficionado? What do you do when somebody in front of you places a huge order, which you should not be allowed to do? And what do you do if you place your own order, you drive away to find out that the hot mustard dipping sauce for the McNuggets is nowhere to be found?
Well, we should start out then with
Can I give the number
Joe
first?
Pesci.
877-301-8970. What did Joe Pesci have to say?
He's giving us all advice about drive-ins from the beloved 89 classic buddy comedy Lethal Weapon 2.
Can I give you two guys a friendly piece of advice, okay? Don't ever go up to the drive-thru, okay? Always walk up to the counter. You know why? Okay, I'm gonna say it. Okay, they you at the drive-thru, okay? They you at the drive-thru. They know you're gonna be miles away before you find out you got okay? They know you're not going to turn around and go back, so they don't care who gets okay, sure. I don't give a I'm not eating this tuna, okay? Shut up!
That's actually pretty close to reality
That is
sometimes.
a good point, right? That's why you have to check your menu before you leave the window.
But
of
if
the
you do,
drive-thru.
then you're pissing off the people behind you,
You are, but
who are waiting in line. Do you have any drive-through? By the way, you probably haven't been to a fast food place since your kids were young.
I have not. Well,
Is that
that's not
true?
true. That's not true. I've been to the drive-thru at Dunkin' Donuts.
You have?
Yeah, because often you're driving home, you get the drive-thru at Dunkin', get a cup of coffee, a couple of donuts, to get you through the end of the rest. So I've been there a lot.
I go
and
to
that's
McDonald's
always fun.
on Western
You have to
Ave.
shout at them a lot,
No, you don't.
Yeah, you do, because the hearing, the communication is not as great in the so-called squawk box.
Do you want
as
an
they say.
interesting factoid I learned in preparation for the segment?
What would that be,
The
Jim?
average wait overall at all fast food places is, which I did not know, is 5.5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Guess how much AI reduces the 5.5 minutes? You'll be stunned.
Not by that much.
11 seconds.
I was surprised.
I mean,
You have to get
really.
better. But there's a lot of feeling that the pandemic really changed everything. This New York Times piece says the pandemic sent people into the comforting isolation of their cars to get tested for COVID, to celebrate birthdays, and even vote. And now it seems they don't want to get out of their cars, at least not to eat. So that's why we don't want to interact with people. That's why we stay in the cars. We have less tolerance for strangers.
That's not the only reason. You want another good reason to go through drive-through? A pet.
A pet is a great
Right.
reason to go through the
I
drive-thru.
ordinarily, if Teslas were not under attack, I would tell you that the Tesla has a dog mode, but I won't tell you, where you press the dog mode.
Oh, I've
button,
heard of this.
And it provides air so you can leave the
conditioning.
dog in the car.
Yeah.
And the big screen, which I'm not going to mention because we don't talk about Teslas, says the dog is fine or some such thing.
I know, but
so
people
when
would
the
still
cop
be
comes
freaked
to
out.
arrest you.
But people would still be freaked
Yeah.
out because they wouldn't know that, and they see the dog in the car.
No,
in
they
the
would know.
summertime.
There's a big sign on the dashboard.
What is this? Well,
it
yeah,
says
just
your
look at the
dog is fine.
dashboard.
Is the dog? You can't miss it. It's huge.
That's if you're sitting in the car.
screen. Well, no, you look through the window.
You look
You
through
see
the
this-
window. Okay.
877
I think it's a
301
bad idea.
897. So what are you saying? It's pets, limited human contact, and 5 minutes is really not so bad.
Now, I just want to mention one other thing, and that, of course, is the all-important play area. I did not know that the first play area was started in 1971.
I didn't know that.
And the ball pit came into being at McDonald's in 1976.
How many diseases do you think were in the average ball pit?
Well, that was one of the concerns. That's why they shut down during the pandemic. Yes,
Oh.
but if you had kids in the 80s or the 90s or even the early 2000s
Yeah.
when they started to disappear,
Yeah.
you probably spent a lot of time at the play area because you could sit there forever with your
Ever.
plays, your kids there,
In the balls.
and Jim had a tragic occurrence. It wasn't at the McDonald's.
Wasn't
actually.
tragic.
It was.
Burger King on Route 1.
It was at the Burger King.
It's not
on Route 1.
tragic.
It was tragic. Jim climbed into the tunnel. You went into the tunnel, right, to rescue your kid? And what happened, Jim?
First of all, my daughter, who was a young single digits at the time, crawls into the thing, and there's a spider in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's a long
tunnel.
set of tunnels.
Long tunnel.
And she freaks out, so
Yeah.
she can't go any further. So what I do, not knowing I'd be ridiculed for 25 years by Marjorie about it, is I crawl into it behind her. Now, there are two problems with this. One, as soon as I approached her, what happened? The spider moved away.
Spider
and she
moved away,
crawls
and
to-
she crawled
She
out.
crawls
That's
out
right.
the other side. Now, the other problem is, how do I put this? My rear end was a little large for the tunnel in the middle, and I did get stuck in the middle of the tunnel.
The
at
kids
the Burger
can't
King
get
in Route 1.
by.
I couldn't
They're
get out.
crying.
Oh, forget
They
they
can't
couldn't
get
get
the
by. I
man to
couldn't
move.
get out.
They always have to call the fire department to come in with the jaws of life.
Enough already.
to get him out of there. What do they use? Do they use some?
They use the jaws of
spray
life.
oil?
They put
I think it's
they used
Crisco
olive
oil.
oil on the jaws of life.
Yeah, okay.
877. We're not discussing play areas.
Okay.
877.
I forgot to play the clip.
What is it?
This is a recording
Yeah.
our staff got. This was when Jim was not stuck in the tunnel, but he was at the drive-thru at McDonald's in Brighton.
Oh, help and bother. I'm stuck.
Oh, dear. Oh, gracious.
Oh,
That's not funny at all. This is offensive. Some stupid Winnie the Pooh thing. It's not funny at all. Why are you laughing at that?
I thought it was
It's
a
not even
riot.
funny at all.
Okay, let's go to Marla in Westboro. What do you think, Marla?
Hello, Marla. Welcome.
Hi. If I could find an easier way to get a Diet Coke on the run,
Yeah.
I would do it. But McDonald's is my go-to for a Diet Coke.
That's great
all
to
I
hear.
want from there is a Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, we know that.
50% of the time, I don't get Diet Coke. I get Coke, even though I sincerely, very specifically request Diet.
That's a problem. Do you give it back to them?
To the place,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have to drive back around because I don't discover it.
Wait, you get back in the line? You get back in the line?
I go back around. I bypass the line.
Oh.
I go to the window, and they look at me like I have 8 heads. Honest to goodness.
8 heads.
And they groan at me, and I say, this is not a Diet Coke, and they kind of roll their eyes.
Oh, jeez.
And they give me another one. But I say, this happens half the time at least.
Wait a minute.
And so now I sit where I got the supposed Diet Coke.
It's a great story.
And I put the straw in it. You're taking too much time.
Yeah.
I said, I want to make sure I'm getting a Diet Coke. And
you got to do it.
That's brilliant.
You got to sit there and check the bag and check the diet. Now,
But
Marla,
Marla,
how do you cut the line?
She just walks up to it, I guess.
They don't like that.
No, I just drive my car around, and there's usually... I only do that really if there's nobody, in
that's
that
a
line
felony in
made it up
3
to the
states.
drive
Do you know that,
window.
Marla, or not?
Yeah, they don't like it if you get out of your car and walk back.
Massachusetts, I know it should not be allowed.
Marla, that was a fabulous story. Thank you for sharing that. And I like your style that you stay until you've tasted the Coke
You got
to
to
make sure
stay
you got
until
the
you
proper
check
thing.
to see that your purchases in the bag are actually what you ordered. Here's a Gen Xer here who says McDonald's, Playland, and birthday parties were the best. I miss those simpler days when they would even give you a sundae if you showed up in a Halloween costume. Remember they had those huge enclosed slides you could go down, you could look out the windows. They had the tunnels that Jim could get stuck in. But apparently they became a big liability nightmare.
Because of disease.
Harmful bacteria. That was
really?
one of the reasons. People got second-degree burns. I don't know how you get second-degree burns in the play place, but yeah, they harmful bacteria.
You know what they did at the one in Central Square, which is, I think it's still there, not the ball, but the thing.
Bleach or Lysol.
No, they actually, before you went in the ball pit, they gave you an mRNA shot. And you had to wait 15 minutes to make sure you're okay before you went in the ball pit. Okay.
But I think the drive-through is very popular when you get small kids. You don't want to take them out of the car seats. Everybody just stay in the car. And if you got pets, you don't want to have to get out of the car and go in and order. Let's go to Margo.
How about Marion Medway? The best one of all is the drive-through wedding. It is so efficient. Do they have those in Las Vegas or something?
Do they have those?
I don't know. Get an order of fries with it, too.
Margo in New Hampshire. What do you think, Margo?
Hi there, it's Margo from Hancock.
Oh, hey, Margo.
We love Hancock.
Hi. So you already know from being here that there aren't a lot of opportunities for drive-throughs, but and I'm not convinced people love the drive-through, but I am 100% convinced that they hate going in to the building.
Yeah.
That's my take on that. And the few times I will go to a drive-through, it's pretty minimal, and only if there's no line, and even that is better than actually parking the car and going into a Wendy's or McDonald's or whatever.
There you go. Margo from New Hampshire. Thank you very much for the call.
Right.
Now, apparently...
Hey, say hi for us to everybody. Obviously, Margo, you know that. It's good to talk to you.
Apparently, people are... The drive-thru is becoming so popular that they're shutting down... Different places are shutting down restaurants. Not even going to have restaurants
Well, you only have
anymore.
a drive-thru?
Yeah, they're talking about... and other places that didn't have one are getting them. Shake Shack, which started as a hot dog stand in Manhattan in 2001, now has more than 500 restaurants. Just opened its first drive-thru in Maple Grove, Minnesota, 4 years ago. Sweet Green, another company that you think of as kind of healthy food sort of place, big salads, they opened a lane last year too, so they're starting to get into the drive-through
I've never seen
business.
one.
Well, we've become very well, they don't have that many yet, Jim. They haven't come here yet.
Can I read from Paul from Fort Lauderdale? He's in Florida. He says, here in Florida, you're not supposed to laugh at this, elderly often order into the trash can instead of the speaker.
Yeah, well, we'll be there soon.
It's usually entertaining
Talking to the
unless
trash
you're
can.
trying to get to work. But Paul ended nicely. Sorry about Jim stuck in the tube.
There he goes.
Winnie the Pooh again. We don't really need that. 877-301-8970.
So listen to this. There are all these places like Taco Bell where they're opening these restaurants with no dining room. At this particular one, the kitchen is on the second floor. Below, 3 of its 4 drive-through lanes are reserved for delivery drivers.
Why are you so, you're like really out of your mind over this. Why are you so moved or impressed? Or?
Well, I guess it just shows that people really don't want to go into these restaurants anymore.
Yeah.
They have 4 lanes of drive-through.
Wow, Marjorie, 4.
And no
That's
restaurant.
no restaurant.
At all. I told you.
That's
I was in
amazing.
Dorchester. I was
You
in
were?
Columbia Road,
You
yeah.
were?
And I went to get some coffee at McDonald's, and you couldn't go into the restaurant. It was locked.
That is
you
one
had
of
to go to the
the
drive-through.
most incredible stories
yeah.
I've ever heard.
And it was a little
actually.
dicey. You know why?
No, I
Because
don't.
there were 2 lanes in the drive-through, and the merge could have been a very tense situation.
Now, let me tell you
Jim.
something. If you Google who had the first drive-through, what will come up is In-N-Out Burger.
Yep.
What's that called? Jungle style? What's that
I
called
don't know.
again?
That was
Thank you,
says
Aiden. Animal style.
1948.
No, but let me tell
That was
you,
a long
we
time ago.
both know that we read a story a few years ago that there was some guy in California who opened the first drive-through before In-N-Out Burger. And what did he do like 10 years ago?
I don't know.
Yes, you do. He closed the drive-through. Why did he close the
because
drive-through?
he thought people were getting too fat.
Too fat in this
Yeah,
country.
it was a method to combat obesity. Yeah, that was kind of the trend. And by the way, our staff has put up a picture of the play place at McDonald's.
Well,
in
that's not very
2025.
helpful for
no,
people
but
listening
I'll
to the
explain
show.
what it is.
What is it?
It's 2 lonely chairs in the corner of the
that's very
McDonald's
sad.
with 2 screens, so the kids can sit there in front of the 2 screens and play video games or something while they're waiting for
That's so.
they're waiting for the food.
Do you want to take a call? Or
Yeah,
what
let's
are you
go to
doing
Marlene
here?
in Rhode Island.
Hello,
Hi,
Marlene in Rhode Island.
Hi, Marjorie and Jim. First-time caller.
We love first calls.
I love
Hi.
you, too,
Well,
and
thank you.
I laugh.
You do?
Well, most of the time I laugh.
Well, yeah.
But I'm calling about, I can't understand these drive-thrus. I look at Dunkin' Donuts, and I pull in, and there's 20 people in line.
Yeah.
I walk in, I get my coffee,
That's an excellent
and
point.
they're still in line. I say, get your lazy bum out of the car and go in there and get it.
And why do you think they don't,
How can
Marlene?
they stand sitting there?
This is a
in that
brilliant
line?
first call. I'm so glad you made this point. Why do you think they don't do exactly as you do, Marlene?
I really don't know.
You don't know.
I guess they just. Do you enjoy sitting there in this line and not,
Yeah, it's like
waiting
masochism.
like 15 minutes to get
Yeah,
a coffee?
I don't
or
get it.
Like same thing, Starbucks, anywhere. I go in the place and get it. And then if you get the wrong thing,
Yeah.
you see it right then.
Let me tell you something. The
gotta
fact
check.
that
You
you
gotta
had the
check.
courage to say what you said and no one else has, Marlene, and makes an excellent first call. Thank you for doing it. Brian from Billerica says drive-through funeral homes in Florida. You don't drive through, you just drive.
So do you
And
drive
then
through, look at the body, wave, and keep going, or
Well,
who's driving
I haven't
through?
done that. I
Obviously,
don't
the
know.
hearse is not driving through. It's the people that are coming.
Why do you
to-
say that? Oh,
Well, I mean,
there's no real point if it's the hearse because the body's in there. Yeah.
maybe I don't know if you look through the window.
You know what the
in
person
parking
didn't
lot?
say a minute ago?
What?
When the elderly customer orders
Can
that the
you put
trash
up
can.
a picture of the tunnel that
What?
Jim got stuck in.
That's not.
bother.
Okay. Why can't you explain to me why
It
you
wasn't
find
a
this
tunnel.
is
It was like
amusing?
a rope thing. It was
No,
kind
it was
of like
not a rope thing. It was a
wasn't
plastic
tunnel.
tube. Yes, it was.
It was a plastic tube.
Plastic tube.
God,
yeah.
that's even worse.
And it was not made
Plastic
for
tube.
however old I was then. Rear ends at
Okay.
that particular point.
A surprise truth is that
I
COVID.
know the answer is we can't put up a picture of it, but thank you. Even if we had it, we can't. So stop asking, everybody. Stop asking.
That'd be great. I get a big kick out of that.
Okay.
A surprise truth is that COVID-19 originated from a McDonald's ball pit, but the truth will never come out because Trump is such a McDonald's fan. That's from
probably
Jay
true.
in Brighton.
So here is, this is amazing. Our staff, which Marjorie refers to as her staff, actually, apparently, so they say, got sound of me at the drive-thru at McDonald's in Brighton, which is the one I go to. I usually get the 2 for $3.99, Marjorie.
Uh-huh.
You can get a double cheeseburger,
Yeah.
a McChicken, or 2 of these 3 things, or a 6-piece McNuggets.
Wow.
For $3.99.
That's swell.
So here, they say they have it. Here's the sound of me ordering, and I'm very respectful all the time at the McDonald's in Brighton. Here it is.
I would like to buy a burger.
The funniest bit in any, that's Steve Martin in the Pink
Martin.
Panther. The funniest bit is when he's trying, was he a spy in the Pink Panther? Yeah. And they're training him to speak like an American
Inspector
would.
Clouseau or
I
something.
would like a hamburger.
I would like to buy a burger.
That's one of the ways he tries doing it.
Okay, Dave in Shrewsbury says the most frustrating thing about the drive-thru is not getting napkins. Happens all the time. Any drive-thru employee who gives a customer an order without napkins should be fired.
Can I tell you, I can live without the napkins because I store napkins in my console.
Oh, that's good. That's
But
good.
if the dip
The
for
Tesla console.
don't mention that.
Actually, Tesla comes with a special napkin.
No, they have someone
dispenser.
deliver the napkins to you. If you don't get the dip, I think people can relate to this.
The dip
if you
is-
buy
you
like
gotta have the dip.
McNuggets and you drive away and
Yeah.
you don't have the dip or any sort of dippable kind of things, it's very, very upsetting. What do you think?
Supposedly there are drive-through pizza and drive-through gun stores in some areas of the South.
Wouldn't you believe that?
I don't know.
Kevin in Brookline, welcome to the show. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, friends. First off, thank you for this topic. Just for nice.
Oh, are you our buddy, Kevin?
I am indeed. How are you?
Kevin. How are you? It's so nice to talk to you. How are you?
Good. You're keeping us sane, and we appreciate the good
You're a
fight.
sweetheart. What's up?
I gotta mention In-N-Out Burger in California and the West Coast, which up until recently has only been drive-through.
I didn't know that.
It's so it's so successful for them that I'll say fairly recently when they started doing dine-in, they were worried that it was going to wreck their model, and instead it's still busy no matter what. Because like Market Basket here, they go out of their way only to hire like really friendly and competent people, and it's fantastic. It's fresh, and and so I think that if you go out of your way to do things right, which is tough these days, you'll only be rewarded for it.
Now, Kevin, I want to know, what do you think is better, Shake Shack or In-N-Out Burger?
Good question, Marjorie.
That's a great question, and when I bring my kids to Shake Shack, I ask myself that question with every bite. They're pretty comparable. They're pretty comparable. I think the only difference is that why In-N-Out Burger won't come to the East Coast is they won't go because they don't have any freezers. They won't go anywhere if there's not a meat plant within like 200 miles.
Is that true?
To bring stuff. It is absolutely true. Look it up. It's an amazing thing. In fact, I want to call them because I found a meat plant in New York, which is just under the 200-mile radius. So I'll be looking for investors soon, Jim. You and I.
I think I'm ready.
Them in.
Hey, Kevin, it is wonderful to hear your voice. Call us again soon, and thanks for the info on In-N-Out Burger. You were in California. Did they have it?
Yeah,
Not when you were
I
at
went to
Stanford.
one.
They
I
had
went
that?
to one. Yes.
Or subsequent?
This was last year when I was out in California. They went to one. It was
pretty good.
Everybody's lined up in their uniforms. It's like a model of efficiency. You know what I mean? You have this sense that we're all concerned about efficiency. I think Shake Shack is better.
Kevin said very nice things about the people working in In-N-Out Burger.
Yep.
Can I do a shout out to the women who work at the drive-thru at the Western Ave McDonald's?
Absolutely, Jim.
They really, I'm serious, they are incredibly friendly. And despite...
How often are you there?
Occasionally. That's generally what I say. And they say, yes, feel free to buy a burger.
Okay.
Now, let me just say this. What am I going to say? What was I saying? They never get your order wrong there, I should say. And that's I hate this criticism of this. Why are you laughing? Because someone said something about me getting stuck in the tube.
But it's a funny
What is
text.
it? What?
Well, it's not that funny. It's kind of a dilemma.
What is it?
I once ordered 2 cheeseburgers from McDonald's, drove away, got on the Mass Turnpike, took a bite, only to realize they'd given me 2 cheeseburgers minus the actual burgers. I only got the buns, cheese melted, pickles, and ketchup. That's from
great.
Tina from Munson. Oh,
So what'd she
Tina.
do? She didn't finish.
Well, she didn't tell us what she did, but that's why you have to check your order. You have to make sure you get it right there before you leave the window. Wouldn't you say that? That's true, Jim.
So here is Don on the road says, listen, this is heartwarming. I use the drive-thru between 11 and 2, so I don't miss a second of Boston Public Radio. Is that
Isn't that
beautiful?
lovely?
Here's another one, anonymous. Breaking news, Elon Musk lays off thousands of Tesla workers whose sole job was to deliver napkins to Tesla owners. That was one of the bonuses, I thought.
John in Vermont says his favorite drive-thru was in Louisiana, where you can get a giant daiquiri to go. You can drink in the street in Louisiana. Remember, we always talk about New Orleans.
No, you can drink on Bourbon Street. You can't drink on I think only on Bourbon Street. Am I right about that?
He didn't say he was on Bourbon Street. He got to take out a drive-thru daiquiri. Wow.
Daiquiri. I'm with Aiden on this. Aiden is suggesting it's not a daiquiri.
It's not?
No, it's a daiquiri.
It's a daiquiri?
Daiquiri. A daiquiri, Adam says.
Daiquiri?
So
Okay.
here's an anonymous texter, which is one of the reasons why Marjorie and I have an iffy relationship. How about a weekly replay of Jim stuck in the fun tunnel? I had to pull over laughing, the anonymous texter says.
Rhode Island has drive-through weed stores.
I don't think that can be true. Can that be true?
I don't know.
Okay, Deb in Rhode Island, we've been...
Maybe Deb knows about the drive-through weed
Hello,
stores.
Deb. Hi, welcome.
Deb, do you know about
caller, long time listener?
Thank you.
Do you know about the drive-through weed stores in
I
your
don't know anything about the weed store.
Ocean State? No,
but
okay.
Either way.
Every time I go to if I go into a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks or something, and I go inside rather than the drive-through. They have one person taking care of the inside, and the line is long, and they have about 6 people taking care of the drive-through, and the drive-through is moving much faster.
There you go.
Well, I think that's true because nobody...
And I want to say about Jim being stuck in the tube, just one thing.
Please
Jim,
do, yeah.
I admire you as a parent because as a parent, if my kid were stuck in the tube, I'd say good parenting. You went in and you helped the kid.
Thank you.
Very good parenting.
Deb, thank you. And that's what one would hope Marjorie would have said under the circumstances. But instead, she's laughing uncontrollably on a plastic bench not too far away. Thank you for that. Deb, thank you for your very warm comment. I appreciate it.
You've gotten stuck in a lot of places involving seats.
Here it is. One of our coworkers said, Mother Earth Wellness is home to New England's only cannabis drive-thru in Pawtucket. It's in Pawtucket, yeah.
Wow.
Well, you said that.
Okay. Oh, you can go to CVS. They have a drive-thru there, too. Do you know that?
No.
Yeah, I guess they do.
You know what's really exciting?
What?
If you have a drive-thru, there's a drive-thru. I'm a Citizens Bank customer.
Mm-hmm.
There's a drive-thru in Arlington. I'm sure there are others too. How exciting is that? Just
Jim,
get the cash out of your...
banks
Oh, there's one in Somerville,
there have been
too.
banks forever.
No, that's to make like a
drive-thru.
deposit or something, isn't it?
Or to get the ATM.
Oh, you can do an ATM?
Yeah, they're everywhere.
They are? I didn't know that.
Okay, Daniel from Worcester, thank you for calling.
By the way, can I just say sometimes,
Yes.
I want to be clear about this, Daniel. We'll get to you in a second. I don't always order the double cheeseburger and the 6-piece nuggets. Sometimes I order the McChicken and the 6-piece. And I know it's all chicken.
We're all very excited about
I know
that.
it's all chicken,
Yeah.
but sometimes I'm in a chicken kind of mood, you know? What's the name of size book? Eats Chicken? What's it called?
I don't know.
It's not
Don't eat the chicken.
Don't eat the chicken.
The chickens love you.
Daniel
Don't eat
in
them.
Worcester, what's up there?
How you doing, sir? I'm a first-time caller. I live in Leominster, but I'm in Worcester today.
It's okay. We love first-time callers. Thank you for doing that. Welcome.
I was just talking to an older friend today about this same situation.
No.
Because on John Fitch Highway, there's a only drive-up Dunkin' Donuts.
No.
A new one.
Meaning
on
you
John
can't
Fitch
go in
Highway.
the store?
No, they have a window.
Oh.
So you can actually go and order at the window if you
I
want.
see.
But the thing is, my sister lives in Moncton, New Brunswick, and they have a local ordinance. You can only idle your car for 5 minutes because of the environment. So what really irritates me is all the drive-thrus, the cars just sitting there burning gas for nothing.
So wait a second, you have to drive away after 5 minutes?
No. You can't idle your car in Moncton.
I see
because of the cold. And it makes sense, too. People just let their cars run.
I like that.
To warm up.
Daniel, you brought great information to the show for your first call. That was excellent. Will you call us again, please?
I will, and I am against drive-ups.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Those are fighting words there.
They are
now,
fighting words.
Maha from Boston says this is really out of control. Wasn't there an encounter between Jim's posterior and an opera seat? Actually, that
it
is
was a
not
Fenway.
true. It was a Fenway.
seat.
It was a box seat on the
They had to
right
get
field
the
line
jaws
during
of
the
life.
playoffs. We had to use that. What's that spray called? HP50?
Pam
No.
spray. Oh, WD-40?
WD-40 to get me out.
Or Pam.
Oh, that's funny. Jared
Crisco.
thinks this is funny, too.
You never got stuck in a seat in Fenway, did you, Jared?
No, I did not.
And you've never been in a drive-thru in your whole life.
I have. Of course, I've been
No,
through a
you-
drive-thru.
It was a seventh inning stretch. Everybody's supposed to stand up. But Jim is trying to stand up.
It was a political statement. It wasn't because I couldn't get out of my seat.
Do you still have the divots in your thigh?
That's really very
The little
unkind.
from the screws.
The ushers were really sympathetic,
They
though. They were
were.
very kind.
Unfortunately, I had to go home with the seat attached. They brought a couple of bolt removers.
One way to get
Hard to drive, though.
an
It's really
artifact.
hard to drive that night. Okay. I'm only doing this because it makes Marjorie so happy. It's humiliating, actually. So, what is your? Do you do drive-thrus now, allegedly, or what? You don't know.
Occasionally, of
Okay,
course.
forget that.
Yeah. But my favorite places don't have it. The Shake Shack and what's the other one?
I know.
Oh, I love Tasty Burger, but they don't have a drive-thru.
But Shake Shack has one out someplace else, and they're starting to have them. So I think it doesn't say when the Shake Shack is going to be here.
I mean, we could be like all the other people that just turned it into a drive-thru. And
That's right. That's right. They have.
Okay, good.
They just don't, they opened their first one like 4 years ago, so I think it's going to be coming here soon.
Okay, fine. Let's move on.
They have one in Chestnut Hill.
But in the meantime, I should not drive in.
It's not a drive-thru in Chestnut Hill.
It's not
on
a drive-thru.
Route
It's a
9.
regular
It's
one.
on the right one.
It's a regular one.
Whose guilty pleasure is Shake Shack?
Michelle Obama.
Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding,
They
ding.
are
Okay,
good.
quickly, what's on the
I'll
show?
be really quick. Rebels, Rights, and Revolution. We're going to be talking to the Massachusetts Historical Society about their new exhibition looking at 1775,
That's a
250
great
years
place,
ago.
by the way.
It is a great place. Shucked, the musical I loved about Korn, which was a Tony winner.
I remember this. Yeah.
Coming to Boston. And remember, I was telling you all the jokes because I thought they were so funny. Well, I talked to the joke writer, Robert Horn, who wrote the book for this musical. And then Julia Swanson takes us on another public art tour to get us outside for spring, which is fabulous.
Sounds fabulous. Nice to
Jared,
see you.
Jared, thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
If you hear anything about the drive-thru at Shake Shack, let me know. That would be
Had one nugget
fun.
once.
You had a nugget once?
I had one.
One.
Yeah. One.
Okay. Thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're going to be back at the Boston Public Library with the ACLU of Massachusetts, Carol Rose, food policy analyst Corby Kummer, former ambassador to Denmark, Rufus Gifford, is going to tell us all about
Hold on a
Greenland.
second. Anonymous texter, the day before we took my grandmother's license away, she created a drive-thru at a local grocery store. God, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Rufus Gifford, John King.
Yeah, it's seen as John King. Thank you to Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer, John LaClaw Parker, and our executive producer, Jane Bologna. Special thanks to Patrick Lally for running the YouTube live stream, The Culture Show with Jared Boney.
What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the University of Massachusetts Amherst. United around a vision for public access to revolutionary education, UMass Amherst gives students the opportunity to seek solutions to the challenges of today. Learn more at umass.edu.